Do you remember your best friend from high school? The one who always knew what you were thinking before you said it out loud? Now imagine realizing, years later, that maybe they knew too much. Before we start, tell me in the comments, are you still in touch with your childhood best friend, or did life quietly pull you apart? I was 26 the year Clara came back. We hadn't spoken since senior year, not because of a fight, but because of silence. The kind that grows naturally, like ivy over a locked door. We'd been inseparable once, sleepovers every weekend, secret codes in class, plans to move to the same city. And then, one October night, she vanished. Her family packed up overnight and left town without a word. For a while, people whispered that her father had gotten a new job, but no one could tell me where they'd gone. And after a few months, everyone stopped asking. Everyone but me. It was a Thursday evening, late autumn. I'd just come home from my shift at the bookstore, hair damp from drizzle, coat heavy with the smell of old rain and coffee. I lived alone, in a small second-floor apartment overlooking the narrow streets of Milford. Quiet town, quiet life. I liked it that way. The night was slow. I made tea, played a soft podcast, and curled up with a blanket. And that's when I heard it. 3 deliberate knocks on the door. Not hurried, not gentle, just certain. At first I thought it might be my neighbor, Mrs. Lang, the elderly woman who occasionally borrowed sugar or tea bags. But when I opened the door, my breath caught in my chest. Clara stood there, older, thinner, eyes shadowed by something I couldn't name. Her hair, once honey blonde and glossy, hung dull around her shoulders. She smiled, but it was the wrong kind of smile, stiff at the corners, delayed, like she was remembering how to do it. "Hey," she said softly, "you look exactly the same." I froze, teacup still warm in my hand. "Clara?" I whispered. "It's been 10 years. 8, she corrected, her eyes flicking past me toward my living room. "Can I come in?" Even now, I can't explain why I let her. Maybe because of nostalgia. Maybe because the sight of her stirred something old and unfinished. Either way, she stepped inside before I could answer. The air shifted immediately. It's strange how someone's presence can change the entire feeling of a room. The quiet warmth turned heavy, like the space itself was holding its breath. She looked around slowly, taking in the framed photos on the wall, the lamp on the side table, the faint music still playing. "You always liked cozy places," she murmured. "You hated silence." That made me flinch. She still remembered things she shouldn't, small things I'd forgotten about myself. We sat on the couch. She didn't take off her coat, didn't touch the tea I offered. When I asked where she'd gone after high school, she only said, "Away." And when I asked why she'd come back, her eyes shifted again, past me to something unseen. "To finish something," she said quietly, then smiled again, too wide this time. "To see you." It should have ended there. A brief reunion, an awkward conversation, maybe a promise to catch up that neither of us would keep. But she didn't leave. Hours passed, the sky outside deepened, and she was still there, talking, remembering, asking me strange questions. "Do you ever hear things in this apartment? What time do you go to bed? Do you still dream about the lake?" That last one made my skin crawl, because I had been dreaming about the lake. The same dream, again and again. The two of us standing on the dock behind her old house, moonlight trembling across the water, her whispering something I could never quite hear. And then a splash. I'd woken each time with wet hair. I laughed it off, trying to keep the air light. "You're still weird," I teased. "You always liked creepy questions." She tilted her head. "Do you still like answers?" Something in her tone made me go still. It wasn't playful, it wasn't curious, it was clinical. "Clara," I said carefully, "what happened after you left?" She didn't blink. You don't remember? That was the moment the atmosphere changed completely. The rain outside stopped. The room felt smaller, and a cold draft slipped through the window even though it was shut tight. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the truth was, no, I didn't remember. The last night we'd spent together was a blur. A party by the lake. Laughter, then darkness. I must have looked pale because Clara smiled again. That same offbeat smile. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'll remind you." She reached into her bag and pulled out something. A small glass jar. Inside was murky water and a single gold chain tangled around what looked like hair. Mine. I gasped, stepping back. "What is that?" Clara stood, holding the jar like an offering. "You left it behind," she whispered. "I kept it safe. All these years. That night didn't end with screaming, not with running, just silence." She placed the jar on my table, smoothed her coat, and said she'd be staying in town a while. "I'll visit again," she added, like it was a promise or a warning. When she finally left, I locked every door and window. Still, I barely slept. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw her reflection, not outside the door, but standing quietly inside the mirror, smiling. Outside, the rain started again, soft, rhythmic, almost comforting. And over it faintly, I could swear I heard someone humming, a tune I hadn't heard since high school, the lullaby Clara used to sing when we stayed up too late. Only this time, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from under my bed. When you live alone, you learn the shape of your nighttime sounds. That's why it's easy to notice when one new sound joins the room and refuses to belong. Quick check-in. If a sound woke you at 2:14 a.m., what do you think it would be? Pipes, a neighbor, or something you can't name? Tell me in the comments. I didn't look under the bed. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe it makes me practical. Either way, I decided that if something wanted my attention that badly, it could have it in daylight. I stood there with my back to the bedroom door, every muscle pulled tight, listening to the rhythm of the hum. Not a tune at first, just a thin, steady tone that slid up and down, like a fingertip around the rim of a glass. It stopped the second I whispered, "Clara." Silence flooded the room, the kind that arrives fast and heavy, as if silence can pour. I checked the clock on my nightstand. 2:14 a.m. The time felt important for a reason I couldn't explain, like the night itself kept notes. I backed out of the room, closed the door, and moved to the living room couch with my blanket and a small lamp. I told myself I'd only rest my eyes. The lamp's warm circle felt safer than the dark. I fell asleep there, upright, like a passenger between stations. When I woke, a thin gray light had pulled itself across the floor. Morning softened the edges of everything. For a few seconds, I could believe there'd been no humming at all. Then I saw the jar on the table. The water inside looked cloudier than the night before. I placed it on a coaster, as if that would turn it into something ordinary. I made coffee but forgot to drink it. The apartment smelled like the lake, wet wood, old rope, cold stone. That smell didn't belong to any season. It belonged to one place. Halfway through getting ready for work, I did what I had promised myself I wouldn't do. I knelt beside the bed and lifted the edge of the quilt. Nothing waited in the dark. Only dust, a lost earring, and a shallow line of chalk I didn't remember drawing. It ran along the baseboard in a neat curve, like the start of a circle. My throat tightened. I hadn't owned chalk since grade school. A small hair snapped against my knuckle. I eased it free. Blonde, not mine. I let the quilt fall, stood, and stared at the doorway as if something had walked through while I knelt. 2 rules formed in my mind without my permission. Rule 1, do not put your face near the gap where the floor meets the bed. Rule 2, do not speak the name unless the room feels warm. They weren't superstitions. They felt like directions I had been given and forgotten until now. I was almost late to the bookstore. I ran a comb through my hair, grabbed my bag, and left the jar where it was. The air outside had the clean bite of last night rain. Leaves stuck to my boots. The walk calmed me. Milford always did, with its modest shop fronts and tidy porches. Even the old firehouse, now a cafe, looked like it apologized for the sirens it used to scream. At the shop, Liam was already behind the counter, building a small castle of returns. He had the kind of smile that arrived slowly and stayed. "You look like you slept on a train," he said. "Didn't sleep much," I admitted. "A friend dropped by. Late." He glanced up with a little nod. "Good friend?" "Old friend," I said. "Older than I know how to hold." He didn't press. That was one of the reasons we got along. In a town where people asked about your business kindly and often, Liam was the only person who let quiet be the answer. I spent the morning shelving used paperbacks, crime, romance, a cookbook with grease stains that smelled like cinnamon. Whenever the bell over the door chimed, I looked up too fast, expecting Clara's shape to find me between stacks. She didn't come in, but just after noon, an elderly woman stepped out of the rain and set a parcel on the counter. Silver hair, blue coat, a practical pair of shoes that belonged to a person who trusted her feet. "Can I help you?" I asked. She tapped the paper parcel. "To be held for Miss Finch." She said my last name like it was a word she'd used her whole life. "That's me." "Good," she replied, sliding the bundle toward me. "She said to deliver it here. She said you'd recognize the handwriting. There were no stamps or labels, only my name written in a familiar looped script I hadn't seen since high school. Clara's. I paid for the book I didn't yet know I owned, because it felt wrong to receive anything free from that script. Then I took the parcel to the back room, sat at the scarred wooden table, and unwrapped it. Inside lay a thin notebook bound with twine. Cream paper, no cover. The first page held a title in pencil, Rules of the Place. The second page contained a list, each line written in the same calm, neat hand. If you hear the hum at 2:14, do not answer with your name. Leave a glass of water by the window before you sleep. If the jar turns cloudy, do not pour it out. Keep quiet when you pass a mirror at night. Do not go to the lake alone. If she asks, "Do you remember?" say, "Tell me slowly." When the lullaby starts, sit on the floor. Do not step over chalk without asking permission. If the room grows cold, ask a question you already know the answer to. You will be tempted to apologize. Use her name only when the room feels warm. I read the list twice, then a third time. My hands shook, not dramatically, not movie shook, just a small tremor that turned the page with care. I flipped ahead. Some pages were blank. Some held sentences that felt like they went with the rules, small expansions written as if she'd tried to teach me a language she wasn't sure I still spoke. The hum is not a threat. The hum is a key. Water remembers. So you must not empty it until you are invited. Chalk marks where the room has thinned. Questions are bridges. Walk back the way you came. I kept reading until Liam knocked on the door frame. "Everything okay?" "It's a manual," I said softly, surprised by my own answer. "For what?" "Night." He smiled at that, then waited a second longer than he needed to. "Need a break?" "Yes," I said, closing the notebook gently. "But I think the break is the reading." I wrapped the notebook back in paper and tucked it into my bag. Through the rest of my shift, I felt steadier, like I could hold two troublesome facts at once, the jar of lake water on my table and the humming under my bed. Neither would be solved between sales and shelving, and neither demanded panic. They asked for attention. I walked home at dusk. Streetlights clicked to life one after the other, small suns doing their best. Mrs. Lang watered the 3 hardy plants on her windowsill, each with a knitted cover around its pot. She raised a hand at me, and I raised mine back. "Cup of tea?" she mouthed through the glass. I shook my head. Later. I wanted to wait until the room felt honest again. Inside my apartment, the smell hit me first. A breath of cold lake and wet rope, then my ordinary air folded around it. Paper, clean laundry, a hint of citrus from the soap I used on the sink. The jar sat where I had left it. The water had turned from cloudy to faintly green like river glass. I set my bag down, washed my hands, and stood in the middle of the room with the notebook. "Rule 2, I said into the quiet. "Leave a glass of water by the window." I filled a small tumbler and placed it on the sill, just to the left of the latch. A simple act, but it made something inside me stand up straight, as if I had just hung a sign in a language the room understood. I turned another page. Trusted confidant. Not everyone can hold both sides of this. Choose a person who listens to lived silence. Old is better than new. I looked at the ceiling, at the soft mark where I had once tried to fix a stain with paint that didn't match. Then I picked up my phone. Mrs. Lang answered on the second ring. "Sweetheart? Could I borrow you?" I asked. "Not for tea, for company, just a few minutes." "Put the kettle on," she said without a beat. "I'm already in my slippers." Minutes later, she stood in my doorway with a tin of biscuits, her hair in a soft roll. She took in the room, the jar, the glass of water, the notebook on the table. "I see," she said gently, like someone recognizing a pattern in knitting. "You do? Something's crossed back over," she said. "And it knows your name." I breathed out. She set the biscuits down and took my hands. "What's your word for it?" she asked. "Clara," she nodded once. "Then we'll say Clara. Say it when the room is kind, and not a moment before." I told her about the humming, the chalk under the bed, the list, the lake. She didn't flinch at any of it. When I finished, she tapped the notebook. "Does it say what to do with the jar?" "Don't pour it out," I said. "Not yet." "Good. Then we can sit with it." She chose the armchair at an angle that let her see the door and the window at once. Old habits, I guessed. We drank tea. We let the evening settle. "You knew someone like this," I said after a while. "I was someone like this," she replied. "Long ago." She didn't elaborate, and I didn't pry. It felt like both of us were saving strength for the hour that mattered. At 9, she stood slowly. "I'll leave you to your rules," she said. "I'll keep my light on. If you need me, knock 3 times and call my name. Not hers. Mine." After she left, I whispered, "Thank you," into the closed door, then into the room, to see which word the space preferred. By 10, I had set things the way the list suggested. A second glass of water near the bedroom door. A small line of salt along the window track, just because I wanted the window to feel protected too. The notebook open on the kitchen table to page 6. If she asks, "Do you remember?" say, "Tell me slowly." I turned off the overhead lights and left the lamp on low. Then I sat on the bedroom rug, back against the bed frame, palms on my knees. I wasn't meditating, I was listening. Midnight. Nothing. 1:30. A car door far outside, a late laugh, wind moving a piece of something across the sidewalk. I almost drifted, the kind of almost sleep that lets the edges of the room blur. Then the hum returned, thin at first, like a line drawn on paper. It grew thicker, steadier. This time it carried a shape I recognized, the lullaby Clara's mother used to sing when we were kids, who refused to stop talking at sleepovers. The clock read 2:14. The list didn't say to panic. It said to sit on the floor. I did. The hum deepened until it wasn't a hum at all. It was a voice without words. It came from the gap under the bed, then from the wall, Then from somewhere above my left shoulder, I stayed still, not frozen, just steady. "Do you remember?" A soft voice asked near my ear. The room stayed warm. "Tell me slowly," I answered. A breeze moved over my cheek, as if someone had leaned close and exhaled. The floor under my hand cooled. Not a warning, a change. Images rose in my mind's eye the way old photos appear in water. Moonlight on a dock, metal rings holding rope, Clara's laugh, a glint between the boards, silver, then gone. We were 16. Someone had tossed something into the black under the planks, a joke we didn't enjoy. I felt the sting of a chain breaking at my neck. I remembered kneeling, reaching between slats, my hair nearly touching the water. Clara holding my belt so I wouldn't fall. "Stop," I heard myself say to the memory. "It's slippery." In the room, the air lifted like a sigh. The jar on the table clicked softly, glass touching wood. The chalk line under the bed finished itself with a whisper against the floor. I didn't see it. I heard it. The dry, small sound of chalk drawing a circle. My eyes filled before I knew why. I remembered the rest, not all of it. Just a small, bright piece. Not a party, not a wild night. Just us. We had been alone on the dock. We had been careful. We had made a circle in chalk and dared each other to sit inside it. We wanted to see if the air felt different in chalk. We waited. Nothing happened. So we made up our own rules and said them out loud to make the circle important. We promised to keep the rules if we were ever far from each other. We promised to come back when the air felt thin. The humming went quiet. A pause gathered, then stretched. "Clara?" I whispered. No answer. Only the sound of a car passing outside and a clock 2 floors down keeping its own polite time. I stood, legs tingling. I didn't step into the chalk circle. I didn't need to. I walked to the living room. The jar's water had cleared, though a single gold strand still drifted like a thought someone hadn't finished. A small ripple touched the surface, then settled. I leaned close enough to see my face reflect beside the chain. The chain moved toward the glass and pressed, as if the water itself wanted to show me something. A shape formed, not a letter, not a number, a curve I knew from a different context. It looked like the loop of the knot Clara used to tie her shoelaces when she wanted them fast and tight. "Fast and tight," she'd say, and I'd echo it. Fast and tight. I found my keys and the little hook on the bottom of the jar's lid. I had missed it before. It was set into the glass like a tiny clasp. The notebook had not said anything about opening the jar, so I didn't. Instead, I turned to the window and lifted the tumbler from the sill. The water level had lowered without a drip on the wood. Something had drunk. I felt ridiculous and grateful at once. "Thank you," I said to the room. I almost laughed, not out of mockery, but relief. Then the apartment's quiet tilted, just slightly, like a picture frame settling straighter on a nail. My phone buzzed on the table, a message from an unknown number. "Doc, tomorrow, before sunset, I'll show you what we promised to forget." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. The number had no name, no city code I recognized. Part of me wanted to delete it and pretend the rules had failed to deliver a visitor into my inbox. Instead, I opened the notebook to the last page. There, in pencil, a line I hadn't noticed before waited alone. "When she invites you, do not go alone. Bring kindness with a voice of its own." I closed the notebook and took a breath that reached my toes. Morning would come, the dock would wait, and somewhere between the chalk line and the jar, my best friend had found a way back to me with instructions. I turned off the lamp and lay on top of the quilt, eyes open in the soft dark. From the hallway, a floorboard clicked, then another. "Mrs. Lang?" I called softly. No answer. I didn't say the other name. The air felt cool now. I sat up. At the foot of my bed, the chalk circle gleamed faintly, as if it had been dusted with a lake light. Inside the circle, a single wet footprint appeared, heel to toes, and waited. The second footprint did not follow. It faced me from the doorway, like someone had stopped there to listen. The mind is good at building doors, and worse at telling you where it hid the keys. If an old friend knocks on one of those doors from the other side, would you open it or pretend you never heard? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and if you've ever had a memory arrive in pieces instead of words. I'm curious which piece came first for you. The wet footprint in the chalk circle dried without a sound. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the pale smudge fade into the grain, heel first, then toes. When it was gone, the circle looked clean again, a white ring that seemed to hold the room in place. I wanted to call Clara's name. The air stayed cool. Rule 10 said to wait for warmth, so I waited. The waiting became a shape. I matched my breathing to the tick of the clock in the living room. I counted to 40 and back. The quiet did not break. I took that as permission to stand. In the kitchen, the jar sat where I had left it. The water was clear and still. The chain inside had drifted to the bottom into a small curve. I placed my palm on the table beside it and pictured the dock, the boards under our knees, the world that had always held us, and the smaller world we had drawn around ourselves in chalk. "Tell me slowly," the notebook had said. The words felt less like advice and more like a door handle. I set a glass of water on the window again and turned the lamp low. Then I opened the notebook to the page I had dog-eared. Questions are bridges. Walk back the way you came. What did we drop between the boards? A locket? A key? A promise? The answer did not arrive. A picture did. Two girls, 12 or 13, ran the last few yards toward the lake. One carried a shoebox. The other carried chalk and a slice of cake stolen from a plastic container in a kitchen that smelled like clean lemon. We were always generous with cake when we wanted each other to say yes. I lay back on the quilt and let the picture play. We worked together the way we did with every small job, without assigning roles. Shoebox down, ribbon off, lid lifted. Inside, a collection of small things that mattered to us. Ticket stubs, a tiny stone with a ring of white through the middle, a paper crane too soft from being folded and unfolded. The chain I kept hidden from my mother, silver, thin, a birthday gift from the aunt who liked quiet girls. We told the water we were borrowing its surface. We said the words like a rhyme. We never believed in magic exactly. We believed in agreements. We tied the chain around the stone because it felt like a test. Would the chain hold the stone, or would the stone take the chain? We lowered it between the boards the way you lower a secret. Slow, steady, a line into dark. Then a finger slipped and both were gone at once without a splash, as if the lake took what we did not mean to give. I felt that pull in my chest again, not grief, something flatter, the feeling of an unfinished chore waiting on a list. The bedroom dimmed another shade. I turned on the small lamp by the dresser. The mirror above it caught my face in a soft oval. Keep quiet when you pass a mirror at night. I stopped mid-step. I did not speak. I lifted a hand and let it fall. My reflection did the same. I do not know what I expected. A delay, a smile that was not mine, a breath where the glass fogged without my help. None of that happened. Only me, a little paler than I wanted to see. Still, when I looked down, I saw that the chalk had taken a new scuff near the dresser leg. A nick, like someone's bare heel had nudged the circle a single inch wider. "Tell me slowly," I whispered, voice low enough to count as quiet. Nothing shifted. The room held. I slept lightly and woke early. On the walk to the bookstore, a mist sat low over the street, the kind that makes the town feel like it has turned the volume down on itself. Mrs. Lang's blinds were open. She lifted 2 fingers from her teacup, I lifted mine back. Liam had already started a playlist of instrumental piano. Rainwater tapped the front window with the patience of a metronome. In that calm, easy sound, I felt the hum return, not to my ear, but to the line of my thoughts, as if the music reminded a buried part of me to move. "Big plans after work?" he asked, scanning in a box of new arrivals. "Maybe," I said. "I might visit the lake." He glanced up, actually glanced, that small flicker when someone wants to be careful. "Alone?" "Probably not." "Good," he said, and let the silence settle again in that friendly way he had. I took the notebook to the break room during lunch. I read page 5 slowly. "Do not step over chalk without asking permission. Ask who? Ask what? Ask the room itself." I could not tell from the handwriting. The page after that was new to me. I had missed it the first time. A list of phrases under a small heading. Things she may say that are not questions. "Tell me if you remember the song. You left this behind when you stood too close to the edge. I will keep this one for you. Wait, not yet." A basic comfort came with seeing those lines. I was not making up the cadence in Clara's voice that felt half-sung. It was here on paper, steady, a proof in graphite. The bell over the front door chimed. A handful of customers filtered in. The day moved the way ordinary days move, filled with small decisions and exact change, with the nice quiet work of stacking paper worlds on a wooden shelf. Mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Bring what you owe. Before the sun leaves the trees. I looked at the jar on the shelf above the staff sink. I had carried it with me because the idea of leaving it alone had made my chest feel hollow. "What do you owe?" Liam asked, his tone almost playful. "Library fines," I said. He nodded like that answer belonged to a decent person, then went back to pricing a stack of small travel guides. By the time I closed the shop, the mist had burned off, and the sky had turned thin and high. The path to the lake runs behind a row of houses. Someone had left out a recycling bin with a single magazine in it. The cover curled like a dry leaf. The empty light made the water look farther away even as I came closer. I followed the last street, crossed the patch of field where the grass comes up in clumps, then the logs that mark the public boundary from the shore. The dock looked the way it always looked in late season, a little tired, a little honest, the boards silvered by weather and time. I stopped at the edge and let the smell of the water meet me. It carried cedar and something mineral that always makes the back of my tongue taste like coins. I held the jar close to my chest. "Not alone," I said softly. We agreed. A bicycle bell chimed behind me. I turned to see Mrs. Lang walking her old blue bike over the grass. She wore a scarf the color of tea with milk and a jacket that had known several autumns. She lifted the front wheel to clear a route and smiled at me without asking further questions than her presence already asked. "Thank you for coming," I said. "You said please last night," she replied. "People mean it more when they say it in the dark." We stopped at the first board. The wood carried a small, clean creak. I felt my shoulders drop. The sound belonged to a world with simple laws. Step, sound, step, sound. It grounded me. I did not step onto the dock. I kept to the shore. Mrs. Lang did the same. "What do we do?" I asked. "We stand where the room can see us," she said, "and we take turns speaking plainly." I closed my eyes and let the wind touch the line of my jaw. When I opened them again, the water had darkened by a shade. Not dangerous. Present. "Clara," I said. The air held a little warmth. "Tell me slowly." A ripple moved from the left side of the dock to the right. It ended directly in front of me. A soft fingerprint pressed into the surface, then gone. "You were here," I said to the water, then to the air. "We were both here. We dropped the chain. We promised to come back if we ever needed each other. The water stayed simple. Mrs. Lang nodded. Your turn, she murmured toward the lake. If you want the girl to hear you, you may borrow my voice. It has practice. No sound answered. Then, somewhere between one wind and the next, I heard a few notes, a line, simple and spare. Nothing more than a rising third and a fall back to center. The lullaby. Clara's mother had favored it because it was easy to hum when you were tired. My eyes pricked. I had heard that tune all year under small noises I had called pipes or weather. Hearing it here, open and plain, made my chest loosen, then pull tight again. Do you remember the words? I asked. Just the shape, Mrs. Lang said. I set the jar on the lowest board where water could see its glass. I did not loosen the lid. I did not touch the chain. I brought what I owe, I said. I brought it back. A small wave lifted the jar and set it down again where it had been. A hello without hands. Something shifted to my left. Not a figure, a density, like a place in the air where a person could stand if a person like that existed. I kept my eyes on the jar. I did not turn my head. I did not want to chase what was not meant to be chased. I forgot more than I meant to, I said. I think you asked me to forget. I think it was part of the promise. The air to my left softened. Mrs. Lang leaned a little closer to the edge, steady as if she had done this many times. Sometimes we forget to stop forgetting, she said quietly. There is a habit to it. The chain in the jar lifted as if a hand had touched the water from below and moved the links with the care people save for jewelry and small birds. I felt the apology rise in my throat, not the kind I gave to strangers when we both reached for the same book on a shelf. The other kind, the one that belonged to someone who had held the other end of every summer for a decade. I am sorry, I said, but I did not use her name. The air had cooled. We waited long enough to feel the thin in our ankles from standing on one place. The lullaby faded to the sound of water against wood. No figure rose, no hand reached. The jar stayed closed. The world stayed ordinary in every way except for the pieces that were not. We will come back tomorrow, Mrs. Lang said, not empty-handed. Bring what she would have liked back then. What did she like? You would know better than I do. A small laugh caught in my chest. It hurt in a way that meant the laugh belonged here as much as the ache did. Orange slices, I said. We used to pretend they were moons. Then we will bring moons. We walked home together and did not fill the air with more than we needed. At my building door, she stopped and touched my sleeve. Not every jar is meant to be opened, she said. Some show you how to carry them. I nodded and tried to accept the sentence without tugging it into a lesson it was not ready to be. Inside, my apartment felt cleaner than it had in days. Not cleaner in the way soap can do. Cleaner in the way a room can seem proud of the way it holds light. The chalk circle under my bed showed a new detail. A small gap at the far edge where the line did not meet itself. An opening the size of a thumb. Permission. I knelt and set 2 orange slices on a saucer, then slid them just inside the circle without crossing the chalk. A simple gift. It felt right to call it that. The hum did not start at 2:14 that night. It arrived at 2:13. Only a minute early, but early all the same. And that difference turned the sound into a thought with edges. The lullaby followed. I sat on the floor and let the notes tell the time. The room's temperature rose by a breath, warm enough to say a name without pulling anything toward me too fast. Clara. The air shifted. A scent, faint and clean, touched the back of my hand where it rested on the rug. Not the lake. Shampoo from a drugstore aisle we used to walk down together, reading labels out loud to each other in a voice we called our shopping voice. The kind that lets a dull errand feel like a story. Do you remember the stone? I asked. The white ring through the middle. The chain in the jar rose to the surface and lay there like a small road. Then it sank again, links touching glass with tiny clicks. Do you remember why we promised to forget? I waited. The lullaby softened, then paused on the third note. Not finished, held. Tell me slowly, I said. Please. The answer came the way fog comes off a lake when the sun thinks about getting up. Not word, then word. Not picture, then picture. A feeling, then a scene that wore the feeling like rain wears air. We were older, 16. We were good at secret places by then. We were less good at goodbyes. We sat on the dock with our knees close and our voices low and made a choice. If one of us had to leave in a hurry, the other would not break. We said the words out loud, made a circle, set a jar of water where the light from the kitchen window could touch it, and agreed to hide as much of the sharp part as we could, even from ourselves, until we could meet again. Your father, I said, hearing the sentence before I knew it. He left so fast. The air cooled, a warning, or a memory of a warning. I am not asking for pain, I said, only for the truth that lets care be possible. The cool lifted a little. The lullaby returned, slower now, a little unsteady, like a person trying to hum and breathe through tears in a polite room. I closed my eyes and let the tears collect without hurry. I did not force them back. I did not make them a scene. They came and went the way a small rain comes and goes. When I opened my eyes, something had changed on the dresser. The mirror showed 2 glasses of water on the windowsill. I turned. Only one sat there. In the mirror, both stood side by side, light moving through them like a promise in duplicate. I see you, I said to the glass image. I know the shape you make. The second glass in the mirror lifted a fraction, like someone had touched it with a fingertip. Then both were still. My phone buzzed. I did not want to look. I looked. Unknown number. You always liked the white ring stones. There is another one under the third board from the chain. Bring a thin knife. Do not come alone. The message carried a scent, the faintest trace of cedar and clean soap, and the sense of a person who had never learned how to place a period wrong. Mrs. Lang's lamp came on across the way, a square of warm light on a tidy room. No shadow moved behind her curtain. She had likely woken the way people wake when the house asks for them. I wrote back to the unknown number with a line I had not planned. I will come. I will bring kindness with a voice of its own. Tell me slowly if there is something I am not ready to hold. No dots showed on the screen. No reply. In the morning, I stood at the kitchen counter with a thin paring knife and an old hand towel. I wrapped both in brown paper and tied the top with twine, the way we used to wrap gifts when we wanted them to feel like we had made them out of a quiet afternoon. I slid the package into my bag. The jar went in last. I paused and listened for any sentence the room might want to add. Nothing came. Only the small confidence that arrives when you have done as much as you can do in 1 hour. I locked the door, took 2 steps down the hall, then took 1 step back and checked the knob again. It felt like habit and care, not fear. The stairwell light hummed. It had always hummed. Now the note had a second tone under it, softer, almost kind. I smiled in spite of myself. On the landing, a slip of paper lay folded on the mat with my name written in a hand that did not belong to Clara or to any clerk. I knew it before I knelt. Mrs. Lang, short, penciled lines. I will meet you by the logs with a thermos. We will go as if nothing is unusual. If something asks you to hurry, let me walk first. I put the note in my pocket and felt my shoulders lower again. The mind is good at building doors. Maybe kindness is good at finding them. I stepped out into the cool morning and let the air take the last of the room's night out of my hair. I had not said her name. The day felt too thin for names. At the edge of town, a train horn called once from far away. Not a warning, a line drawn across a map. The lake held its color. The path held its turns. and under my ribs, a rhythm I had learned in childhood kept time with both. As I reached the field, my phone buzzed once more with a new message that only Clara could have written. Bring the shoebox. A place remembers you in small ways. A scuff in the board. A note in the stairwell light. Tell me in the comments, if you had to bring one object from childhood to feel brave tonight, what would it be and why? The shoebox sat on the top shelf of my bedroom closet, tucked behind winter scarves that still held last year's cold. It was the same box from the old bakery that used to sell lemon squares by the lake. Cream cardboard, faded blue logo, a corner crushed in where I had once packed it too tight. When I took it down, flour dust ghosted my fingers. That made no sense, so I decided it didn't need to. Some things keep their own weather. I set the box on the bed. The chalk circle near the frame caught a strip of morning light and looked cleaner than it should have. Inside the box, the inventory of our small world lay the way we had left it, only tidier. Ticket stubs, 5 paper cranes, a thin silver chain coiled like a sleeping thread, the stone with the white ring, 2 orange slices dried into suns. The chain should have been in the jar. The ring stone should have been under water, somewhere in the dark between the dock boards. I picked up the chain and felt the soft cool of it wake my skin. The jar on the dresser stayed still. The chain inside it stayed visible, a twin in a different room of air. I placed the chain back on the folded hand towel I had packed the night before, then added the knife beside it. The box felt heavier than it had a right to be when I closed the lid. At the sink, I filled a thermos with hot water and tucked a small packet of tea into my pocket for later. I wanted the lake to feel like we had manners. By the door I stopped. I listened. No hum. Only the stairwell's soft electrical note and the shy whistle the window makes when outside air finds a seam. Mrs. Lang's lamp clicked off across the way. A sign. I took the box, the jar, the wrapped knife in my bag, and stepped into the hall. On the landing, someone had straightened the picture of a lighthouse that always hung a little askew. A small correction. It made the space feel cared for. Down on the street, the morning was cool and clear. The sky had that pale, rinsed look that October carries in our town, when the weather has decided to be kind for a day. I walked past the bakery that replaced the old one and still pretended its coffee tasted the same. A boy held the door for a woman with a stroller and then blushed when she thanked him. The blush made the whole scene warm. At the corner, I saw Mrs. Lang. She had her bicycle by the handlebars and a thermos tucked in the basket under a folded blanket. "Good morning," she said, as if we were going nowhere in particular. "Good morning," I answered. "Thank you for coming." "Of course. I enjoy the field before noon. Fewer gnats." She smiled. "That box looks older than both of us." "It is and it isn't." I lifted it a little. "Do you mind walking slowly?" "I quite prefer it," she said. We set off together, 2 people who could be taken for relatives if you squinted. That comforted me. The sidewalk loosed us into the small patch of field that breaks the town from the shore. Dry stalks leaned, grass caught in last night's dew. A dog on a long lead watched us from a porch and wagged once, then twice, as if uncertain whether we were friendly or only passing weather. "Tell me your plan," Mrs. Lang said. I showed her the wrapped paring knife, the hand towel, the old chain, and the thermos. "Simple," she said. "Simple often holds. And if something asks us to hurry," I added, "you go first." She nodded, pleased that I had read her note and agreed to its shape. We crossed under the line of pines that marked the last quiet yard before the path opens. The air cooled, and found the cedar note I had felt in my apartment. The lake appeared the way the lake always appears from that angle, all at once, as if painted while your eyes were on the ground. We stopped at the 3 logs people use like a gate. Past them, the dock waited. Boards, silver gray, nails like dark punctuation. water with a very slight rise and fall that looked like the lake was practicing breathing. I set the shoebox on the first board, but did not step forward. Mrs. Lang rested the bicycle against a birch, then poured hot water into the thermos lid and set a tea bag to steep. "Good manners," she said, handing me the lid, "for whoever needs it." We stood and looked. A dragonfly passed. The dock whispered as the water touched it and turned back. I rested the jar on the board beside the box. The chain inside lifted half a finger's width and settled, as if acknowledging we had arrived in the right place and at almost the right time. "Before the sun leaves the trees," the message had said. It had not yet climbed to the middle of the sky. We had time to be careful. I opened the shoebox. The stone with the white ring sat right where my hands had left it years ago, bright and ordinary. I lifted it and felt the remembered weight. Its ring had always looked like a tiny promise. "Shall we set the scene as you had it?" Mrs. Lang asked. "Yes," I said. "Circle first." We did not draw chalk on the dock. The boards had their own rules. Instead, I placed the stone in the center of the first plank and set the chain beside it. I looked for any sign that this offended the place. Nothing pushed back. "Do we light anything?" Mrs. Lang asked. "Only the water," I answered, and placed the jar so the sunlight could pass through it across the boards. The light made a small ribbon. It felt like a polite introduction. Something about the air to our left thickened, the way a corner of a room can feel full after a person leaves it. I kept my eyes on the ribbon of light. "Clara," I said, and the warmth on my forearms said it was all right to say her name. We brought the box. We brought kindness. We brought the little knife, the towel, and time. A sound rose under the dock. Not a hum this time. A soft three-note figure, as if someone touched the strings on a small instrument without quite plucking them. Mrs. Lang's face changed in that way it does when someone falls into a memory that holds them by the shoulders and sets them down carefully. "I hear it," she said. I lifted the towel and set it open on the board beside the stone. From the bag, I took the wrapped knife and unrolled the paper. The blade flashed a small, common light. We had brought no special tools. That felt correct. "What are we cutting?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. The message asked for the thin knife. Maybe we are not cutting anything at all. Maybe the request mattered more than the use. Mrs. Lang poured her own cup and held it to the air to let the steam blow across the boards as a token. "We drink first, you drink next. We will share the same warmth." I did not speak that rule out loud. Some rules do not want to be named in public. The water near the first piling changed color by a shade, only where it touched shadow. I crouched and peered through the gap between planks into the dark. There is a specific shade of green that belongs to lake depths near docks. It is the color of unfinished questions. In that green, something pale glinted, then vanished. Small, rounder than a stone, too regular to be drift. I sat back and breathed through my mouth to steady myself. Mrs. Lang lowered herself to her knees beside me with the practical grace of someone who knows their joints and their limits and intends to win the day by gentleness. "Describe it," she said. "A bright spot," I said. "Not trash, not fish. It moves like it has a mind and then no mind at all." She nodded and considered the boards like a carpenter who needed to find the precise place where a nail once lived. Her hand hovered, then pointed. "Third board from the chain," she said, "just as the message told you. Look where the wood darkens at the edge. There's a small notch, a natural split. A thin knife might fit there." I measured the boards with my palm and found the split. A sliver. Inside the slit, the grain looked like hair pressed in a book. "May I asked, looking not at her but at the lake. The line of shade along the dock brightened by a degree. I read that as yes, I slid the thin blade into the split and used only the smallest pressure. The board lifted the width of a coin. I looked down the dock in both directions. No one watched, no one saw. I breathed again and raised the board a little more, enough to slide the towel under so the wood would not snap. Mrs. Lang steadied the far edge with 2 fingers. We waited to see if the dock would complain. It did not. Under the gap, the green deepened. "Hold the towel," I said. She held it ready. I slid my hand into the cool and felt the numb bite of lake water claim my wrist. I reached slowly, the way you reach into a drawer when you are not sure what you left inside. My fingers brushed something smooth and round. My heart kicked and then found its normal pace, the way it does when you realize a scare is not a danger. I closed my hand around the shape. Small, cold, I lifted it into the light. It was a jar lid, metal, painted cream with a blue ring, the bakery logo in the middle. I set it on the towel. It made the soft sound of glass and old tin making peace on wood. "Not trash," I said again, and then understood. It belonged to this box. Something touched my hand. The air this time, not the water. A draft like breath from someone who had come closer to see. I did not look to the side. I looked only at the lid. On the underside, someone had written a line in pencil. The water had blurred the ends of the letters, but the sentence held. "If we have to forget, use this to remember in pieces." The handwriting looked like mine and like Clara's, both at the same time. The way handwriting looks when you practice each other's signatures, because you think that is what friendship means in 9th grade. I placed the lid in the shoebox beside the chain. "Another thing," I said to the dock. "Please." We waited. The steam from Mrs. Lang's thermos curled and faded. A crow called from the birches as if it had something relevant to say, and then forgot the last word. I slid my hand into the water again and felt only cold and wood and the small universe under a dock that belongs to fish and to the private business of water. "Enough," Mrs. Lang said, and I obeyed. "Let the place decide what it yields. We came with good hands. We will leave with them." We dried my wrist and set the board back into place. The knife slid free. The towel took the last drop, and then we folded it tight, the way you wrap a gift you want to open later with care. "Orange slices," I said. She smiled and reached into her bag, already packed. We set 2 fresh halves where the sunlight touched the boards, near the jar. I took one and bit, sweet with that clean bite citrus hides in its skin. The lake did not take the other. It sat and looked generous. "What did you forget exactly?" Mrs. Lang asked after a time. "Not the object. The living part." That I told her I would be brave long enough for both of us, I said, and that she told me not to try. She said she wanted a place to set a promise down that wouldn't bite whoever picked it up later. "And you said yes." "Yes," I answered. But I did not know yes would last this long. Behind us, footsteps touched the path, measured, not rushed. A runner would have breathed hard and passed. These steps approached and stopped just at the line where strangers decide if they will call your name. I did not turn. Mrs. Lang did, because she is older and can look at what is difficult without challenging it. "Good afternoon," she said to the air with the respectful tone people used more often when the town was younger. "We are just visiting." Silence answered, not empty, the kind that holds one person's attention. I turned slowly. A woman stood at the edge of the pines, early 30s, a navy coat that would keep a person dry in short rain. She held a phone at her side, as if she had remembered to bring it, but had no wish to use it. Her face was not Clara's. Her eyes were. Not the color, the way they marked a room and kept its edges even. "Hello," I said. "Can I help you?" She smiled the way you smile at a neighbor in a place where you intend to be good at being seen. "Maybe you can," she said. "My sister asked me to meet you. She is late. She always is when it involves the lake." My throat tightened. A sentence started behind my ribs and halted there. "Your sister," I repeated. "She told me to say a line that would make sense," the woman said. "Something about a stone with a white ring and how you believe rings should not be wasted on the bottom of things." I laughed before I could stop it. The sound felt like a cough that changed its mind. "That sounds like us." "She sends a second line," the woman added. "She says not to be frightened of the jar, that you should open it when you feel kind enough to forgive her for keeping so many pieces." I looked at the jar as if it had turned to face me. "Is your sister close?" Mrs. Lang asked. The woman nodded toward the path. "She will come when she can. In the meantime, I am to be helpful and not make a scene." "That is already helpful," I said. She stepped closer only when I stepped back to give her room. She looked at the shoebox, the chain, the bakery lid with our blended handwriting. She looked at the orange slice we had left. Her eyes softened the way eyes do when a detail makes childhood turn its head and recognize itself. "She never stopped talking about this place," she said. "We moved so fast that last year. We left parts of her behind like pins on a map. She has been collecting them." "Are you from here?" I asked. "No," she said. "From wherever our father's work decided to be. But this town is where she sounded most like herself when she told it as a story." We stood with that for a minute, maybe two. The lake kept its slow rise and fall. The jar showed a faint current inside, as if the chain had learned to move like water. "Will you help me do one thing?" I asked the woman. "If I can." "Hold the shoebox while I open the jar." Mrs. Lang gave me a small nod that meant she would stay near the hinge between sense and not quite sense, and keep it from swinging shut. I took the jar in both hands. The lid was not tight. It had never been tight. I felt the faint stick of damp glass, and then the easy turn that meant someone had meant for it to be opened gently. "Before the sun leaves the trees," I whispered. I lifted the lid. No wind, no rush. Only the low, simple sound that a room makes when one more thing finally fits where it was supposed to fit. The water in the jar did not spill. It lowered like a tide, finding its correct shore. The chain floated up and lay across the lip with the casual grace of a bracelet placed on a wrist by someone who knows where it belongs. On the inside of the lid, a line appeared where there had been only glass before, not etched, not ink. A fog print, as if breath carried a message. "Tell me slowly, and start with the part I gave you to carry." I closed my eyes and saw the chalk circle under my bed at home, the small gap that had opened like permission, the wet footprint that dried without a fuss. I spoke to the jar, and to the woman, and to the lake, and to the part of the air that had thickened to my left since we arrived. "You asked me to forget the pain in a way that would let me keep the rest," I said. "You gave me a box and a rule, and a place to return when I was ready to hold both." The chain on the lip made a small sound like a chime, answering yes. "Then here is what I kept," I continued. "You were the first person who knew when I was about to lie to protect someone else. You taught me to tell the truth so softly that it would not bruise." The woman's eyes filled, but did not spill. I felt mine do the same. A faint warmth touched the back of my neck, a presence like a hand not quite set on a shoulder. Mrs. Lang breathed out. "Good. That is enough for now." We stood in the kind of silence that belongs to a room after a kind word. The crow in the birches called again, and this time it sounded less like a warning and more like a neighbor checking their mail. I placed the chain back inside the jar and closed it without forcing the seal. The woman handed me the shoebox. We did not rush to add or remove anything. "Will you walk with us tomorrow?" I asked her. "Yes," she said, "if that is the rule." "It is the kindness," I said. She smiled a little. "Kindness is harder to follow than rules. I will try. We gathered our things and stepped back from the dock. As my shoe left the first board, a ripple moved under the wood from the far end to where I had stood, like the lake had traced our shape and planned to keep it a while. Feathered cliffhanger. At the line of pines, my phone buzzed with a final message for the day. Bring a picture of us tomorrow. Not the favorites, the one where we blinked. Some memories stare back until your eyes water. Others blink first, then ask you to follow. Tell me in the comments, do you keep old photos out in the open or tucked away in a box? Which one would you bring to the lake tonight? The request was simple. Bring a picture of us, not our favorite, the one where we blinked. I knew the exact photo. It lived in a shoebox inside a larger box that I had labeled MISC Summer. The second box sat on the highest shelf of my hallway closet, beside a rolled beach mat that still shed sand when moved. The photo was from the carnival that traveled through town every June. A man with a camera had offered quick prints if you stood against a plywood backdrop, painted with a moon and 3 crooked stars. We were 16. Clara wore a denim jacket with a missing cuff button. I wore a thin red scarf I thought made me look interesting. When the flash went off, a breeze came through the alley. We blinked at the same time. It ruined the picture and made it perfect. I pulled the larger box down and set it on the hallway floor. Inside lay the whole geography of those summers. Postcards I never mailed, ticket bracelets, a map of a park we never reached, the paper crown from a birthday we ate on a curb because the pier was crowded. I sifted carefully until the carnival envelope slid free. There it was, our twin blinks, our ridiculous moon. I held the photo by the edges. The paper had softened over the years and warmed under my fingers as if it remembered the work of being looked at. Found you, I said to the picture, then corrected myself. Found us. On the back, someone had drawn a small circle in pencil, not a full circle. A thin ring interrupted near the top where the line failed to meet itself by the width of a seed. I had never noticed that before. I glanced toward the bedroom. The chalk circle under the bed had the same small opening. It felt like a rhyme spoken across the room. I wrapped the photo in tissue, slid it into the shoebox where the bakery lid and the chain rested, and set the box near the door with my bag. The jar stayed on the dresser, clear and calm. I left a glass of water by the window and breathed on the cold pane until my breath left a small oval. It cleared. No words formed there today. I dressed for a day that could bend either way. Walking shoes, a soft sweater, my coat with deep pockets that made me feel prepared. At the last moment, I slipped the thin knife into the bag again. Not for cutting wood, for steadiness. Sometimes a tool is only a promise to be careful. When I opened my door, the stairwell light hummed in that 2-note way it had adopted since the night of the humming under the bed. A neighbor passed me on the landing with a bag of apples. "Afternoon," he said, and I said, "Afternoon," and the word felt right in my mouth. Outside, the weather had trimmed itself neat. Sky clear and high. Trees bright with the last of their color. The lake would know it was being watched. At the corner, a small surprise waited for me. Liam leaned on his bicycle by the bakery, a brown paper bag looped over the handle. He lifted a hand, then held up the bag. "For later," he said. "Orange shortbread. I figured you might be busy at the lake." I blinked. "How did you know I was going?" "You said maybe. Your maybes sound more like yes when you have your serious coat on." I laughed and felt the pinch of gratitude you feel when someone sees you plainly without making a ceremony of it. "Walk with me to the field?" I asked. "For a bit," he said. "Then I will go satisfy my destiny as a person who buys stamps." We set off. Our town carries quiet even when people fill the sidewalks. Today, the quiet felt steady rather than hollow. "Anything I should know?" he asked after a block. Any rules for being the friend who walks next to someone going to do something that matters? Just this, I said. If something asks us to hurry, Mrs. Lang walks first. That is the best sentence I have heard this week, he said, and meant it. We reached the field where the grass bows in small waves. Mrs. Lang was already there, standing beside her blue bicycle with the thermos in the basket and a folded blanket on top. The woman from the pines waited nearby in the same navy coat, hands tucked into the sleeves the way you do when you are trying to be warm without drawing attention to your cold. She gave a small wave. Relief loosened something under my ribs. I did not want to learn a new face today. I brought the photo, I told her. Good, she said. She was very specific about that one. Does she tell you why? I asked. Almost never, the woman said. She tells me what to bring and how not to make it harder. That sounds like her, I said. We crossed under the pines together. The lake surprised us again, the way it always does when it appears all at once, and then acts as if it had been patiently waiting, which in a way it had. The dock looked unchanged. The boards held that soft gray that only time can explain. The light had moved a finger's width from where it had been yesterday at this hour. I set the shoebox on the first board and did not step forward. Before the sun leaves the trees, I said to the water, repeating the rule. We came early. Mrs. Lang poured tea. Liam set the shortbread on the blanket without asking if we were allowed to eat sweets near the lake. He knew we were. We stood the way people stand when they mean to show respect, without making a show of reverence. I opened the shoebox. The photo lay on top, a small window cut from a day that still felt bright inside my head. I did not hold it up. I set it face down on the towel. The pencil circle on the back looked unfinished in the same lovely way the chalk circle at home had been left with its thumb-width gap. Clara, I said, choosing her name because the air held a gentle warmth that I have learned means yes. We brought the picture that blinked. The lullaby came from under the dock, but only the first line, like a person testing a note before they sing the song they really mean to sing. It was enough. Do you remember why we hated that picture and kept it anyway? I asked. A ripple touched the shore and ran along the line where water meets sand. Not playful, attentive. We kept it because it looked like we were listening, I said. Eyes closed, faces open. It made us look honest. Mrs. Lang reached into her pocket and folded a tissue into a neat square. She set it on the towel beside the photo, as if she were laying out a handkerchief in church. May I see? The woman asked, nodding at the photo. Yes, I said, but look slowly. She lifted the picture by the corners and turned it over. She studied our faces and then studied them again, as if the second look could persuade the first to remember something it had missed. This is how she looks when she wants someone to admit they forgot their own idea, the woman said, pointing to Clara's mouth. That tiny line there. I looked. The tiny line was there. I felt it echo under my own cheek. Liam crouched to eye level with the wood and smiled in a way that did not enter the moment like a visitor. You two look like you were about to improvise rules, he said softly. We were always about to improvise rules, I said. Then we wrote them down as if we had always known them. Would you like me to be the person who holds the box while you hold the photo? He asked. Yes, I said. You are very good at being a hinge. He grinned at the word and slid the box closer. The jar sat where I had placed it, the chain quiet inside. For a second I imagined that if I looked away and then back, the chain would have arranged itself into letters. It did not. It lay like a small river across a plain. Tell me slowly, I said to the water. Show us what the blink hides. The air cooled by a degree, not a warning, an instruction to pay attention. The photo in my hand felt heavier. The paper did not change. The feeling changed. My vision softened at the edges the way it does when sleep stands in the doorway and offers you a seat. The water brought the picture to mind, but not as ink and paper. It returned the sound of the alley where we had stood before the flash, the smell of sugar over frying oil, the creak of the painted plywood moon when the wind moved through the gap behind it, a cardigan sleeve brushing my wrist as Clara leaned closer to adjust the scarf I wore badly. "I like your face when your eyes are listening," she had said, and laughed because it sounded like a line someone in a movie would say. Then the flash, then the breeze, then the blink that became the only thing anyone would see first. I told this to the four of them: the woman, Mrs. Lang, the man who had brought shortbread, and the part of the air that was filling with someone who could not bear to be the center of a scene. The lullaby rested on its second note and waited there with a patience I recognized from a summer job in a quiet shop. I matched my breathing to it without meaning to. "Turn it over," Mrs. Lang said to me quietly. "Look at the back again." I did. The circle on the paper had always been faint. Now it looked a little darker at the spot where the line failed to meet itself. The gap had closed by the width of a pencil point. "Say the word," she said. "What word?" I asked. "The small one you say when you notice kindness doing its work," she replied. "Thank you," I said. The line shone for a second and went still. The gap stayed. It wanted to. The woman touched a finger to the margin where the printed white met the darker border. "There," she said. "Can you see it?" At the edge of the frame, near my shoulder, a tiny impression had formed in the paper. Not a crease, a mark as if something had pressed from the other side with the gentlest of hands. "Do not break the surface," Mrs. Lang murmured. "Look through it." I held the picture up to the light and squinted. The mark lined up with my scarf. At that spot in the image, the red was less red, as if the color had been lifted with a brush. "What is under it?" Liam asked. "Something white," I said. "A ring of white." We all went still. "The stone," the woman said. "Or a sign of it," Mrs. Lang added. "Memory plays fair, but it prefers symbols." I set the photo down and slid the thin knife along the underside of the tissue paper, not touching the picture itself. I breathed, steady and slow. I did not cut. I let the urge to act rise and fall until it was only a small wave. "Try this," Mrs. Lang said, and tore a fresh page from her pocket notebook. "Place it under the photo and press lightly where the mark is. Sometimes a copy has a better idea of itself than the original does." I did as she said. With a pencil, I shaded gently over the mark. A shape appeared on the notebook page. Not a circle, not a ring, a clean little arc, a curve like the top of a letter, something that could become a circle if given time. "It is enough," Mrs. Lang said. "It is telling us the circle belongs here. Do not rush it closed." The air warmed a fraction, then cooled again. The lullaby took its first step back toward silence. "Before we go," the woman said, "she asked me to give you a sentence. She said to wait until you were holding the picture over paper." "I am listening," I said. "She told me to say, 'Do not bring the locket tomorrow. Bring the note you were afraid to keep.'" My mouth went dry in that small way that is not fear, only recognition trying to find its footing. "I know what that is," I said. "Does it matter?" she asked. "It matters more than the chain." "Then we will come," she said, "and we will hold the box while you hold the paper." We stood there a while longer. We shared the shortbread without crumbs landing where they should not. The jar's chain shifted once and rested again like a calm heartbeat might look if it were made of light and metal. When the sun moved down the sky, the shadows of the pines reached toward the water like fingers relaxed in sleep. That was our sign to gather. We folded the blanket, closed the box, and lifted the thermos. I slid the photo back into tissue and set it on top of the bakery lid. The towel smelled faintly of cedar and tea. "Walk you back?" Liam asked. "Please," I said. "Let us pretend this is an ordinary stroll." We took the path 2 by 2. The woman walked beside Mrs. Lang and asked questions in a voice meant for post offices and nurses. Liam and I walked a few paces behind, quiet in the way that makes you feel close without using conversation to prove it. At the line where path becomes road, the woman stopped. "She will meet us sooner next time," she said. "She is learning to be in a place without borrowing too much of the air." "Tell her I am bringing what I owe," I said. "The paper will know." "I will tell her," she said, and left with that unhurried walk of people who grew up moving often and learned not to look like they were leaving. Mrs. Lang reached for my elbow so lightly that I felt steadier before I realized she had touched me. "Do you know where the note is?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I kept it where I thought no one would find it. In the one place I always forget." "Which is?" "The book I never finished," I said. She smiled at that. "Every home has one," she said. "Bring the unfinished thing. It will make sense to her." Back at my building, we paused by the door. "Would you like me to wait inside while you look?" Mrs. Lang asked. "I can keep the kettle busy." "Yes," I said. "Please." She made herself a small household where she stood. She put the thermos on my counter, found 2 mugs without asking which shelf, and set a tea bag beside each, a tiny ritual that made the room remember how to act. I went straight to the shelf by the window, second row from the bottom, where the book sat right where I had left it 2 years ago. A classic I had promised myself to love, heavy with other people's reverence. I opened to the middle. There it was, folded flat where the spine had begun to go soft. A note in Clara's handwriting, 1 line only, written the day before she left town without time for goodbyes. "If I have to go, do not guard the door. Guard your sleep." I sat down. I did not cry as if a scene were ending. I let the line find me and sit with me. "Is that it?" Mrs. Lang asked from the kitchen after a minute. "Yes," I said. "This is the one I could not read until I learned how to hear it." "And now you will bring it," she said. "Yes." The room brightened by a shade, the way rooms do when someone has decided to be honest inside them. The clock on the wall moved toward evening. My phone stayed quiet. The jar on the dresser held still water and a chain that had learned the pace of our day. When Mrs. Lang left, she touched the doorframe with 2 fingers, a gesture I had seen her make once before in the hallway. "Bless the hinge," she had told me then. Today I felt what she meant. I set the photo on the mantel where I could see it from the couch. I set the note beside it. I placed a glass of water on the sill and did not check the time, because I already knew the hour that would try to speak to me. The hum did not begin at 2:14. It did not begin at 2:13 either. Tonight it arrived at 2:12, quiet and sure, like a friend early to a good plan. I sat on the floor and rested my hands on my knees. The room stayed warm enough for a name. "Clara," I said. "Tomorrow I will bring the note and the unfinished book. We can start there." The hum slid into the lullaby and held the first note just long enough for me to match it under my breath. In the mirror above the dresser, 2 glasses of water stood on the sill. On the sill itself, only 1. The second glass lifted in the reflection and tipped toward the room in a small, polite toast. "Thank you," I said to the mirror and to the air, and felt something in the floorboards answer by not creaking. As I reached to turn off the lamp, the carnival photo clicked softly against the mantel. When I turned it over, the pencil circle on the back had closed by a hair, and a new line had appeared beneath it. "Bring the crown from the day we ate cake on the curb." Sometimes a place starts to remember you back, not with words, but with timing. A door that opens a second early, a clock that skips 1 quiet tick. Tell me in the comments, if you noticed time stutter for just 1 heartbeat, would you tell someone or listen to see if it happens again? Morning arrived too clean, too symmetrical, like the world had taken extra care arranging itself before I woke. Every shadow fell where it should. Every sound seemed rehearsed. I found the paper crown exactly where I'd left it, in the same shoebox that had guarded our summers. It had gone soft with years, the cardboard gold dulled to the color of forgotten brass, but the word birthday still shimmered faintly when the light caught it. I placed the crown beside the folded note in my bag, then checked the jar. The chain inside had twisted itself into a small knot. Not tangled, deliberate, like a bow waiting for a gift. I let it be. Mrs. Lang met me at the curb, scarf tied neatly, thermos in her hand as always. "You look like someone with an errand that already knows its ending," she said. "I'm not sure whose ending it belongs to," I said. "Then walk slowly," she replied. "Endings reveal themselves at walking speed." The path to the lake felt slightly wrong today, as if the town had rearranged its corners by a few inches. The bakery stood one door farther from the post office than it should have. The old firehouse clock showed 8:17, but the church bell struck 8 only after we passed the next block. "Have you noticed?" I asked. "Yes," she said, unbothered. "Memory and time are neighbors. When one starts pruning its hedge, the other grows curious." Liam caught up to us at the field, panting lightly, the same brown paper bag on his handlebars. "Shortbread encore," he said, grinning. "Or a peace offering, depending on what today turns into." The woman from the pines was already by the logs, her navy coat buttoned to the throat. She smiled when she saw us, but something about the air around her seemed denser, like heat wavering on asphalt, though the day was cool. "She says we're closer," the woman said before I could ask. "She says the lake is learning the pattern." The dock looked unchanged at first. Then I noticed the smallest differences. The boards no longer aligned in a perfect row. The gaps ran like uneven stitches. The nails caught light from an angle the sun couldn't possibly have reached yet. "Be kind," Mrs. Lang whispered to the boards, and the wind softened, as if in apology. I set the jar down. The chain untied itself with one tiny motion, soundless but certain. When it settled, the water inside reflected not the trees behind us, but something brighter, sky from a time when the lake was still a mirror instead of a mouth. I placed the crown beside the jar and unfolded the note. The pencil line shimmered faintly, like writing pressed on a page below it. "If I have to go, do not guard the door, guard your sleep." I read it aloud. The echo came not from the dock, but from across the water. The same words returned half a second late, spoken in Clara's cadence, calm, deliberate, with that trace of laughter she never could hide when serious. Liam's eyes widened. "I know," I said. "She's not copying us. She's finishing the sentence she started years ago." The reflection of the crown in the jar lifted first, the image, not the object. In the glass it rose slightly, though the real crown stayed flat. Light trembled over its edges like a breath. "Can you feel that?" the woman asked quietly. The air thickened the way rooms do before rain, soft pressure against the skin, a sense that the weather is making up its mind. Mrs. Lang took a step back. "We're near the seam," she said. "Let the water speak first." I leaned forward until my reflection met hers. My face doubled, then blinked. Not both reflections, only one. Mine stayed open-eyed. Hers blinked once, slow, deliberate, like testing the mechanics of being seen again. I reached a hand toward the glass. In the reflection, the crown had shifted, tilted to one side, the way it had when she'd laughed with frosting on her nose that birthday afternoon. "You're still here," I said, "still finding pieces." The reflection nodded once. Then the real crown moved, a fraction, just enough for the paper edge to lift and settle again. "She wants the note," the woman said softly. "That's what she's been collecting. Not things, but promises." The sky dimmed in an unnatural way. Not darker, just older. Like someone had drawn the light with a pencil instead of paint. Behind us, the The town's bells chimed out of order. 2, then 1, then none. Far down the shore, the cafe's window caught the sun twice. 2 reflections where there should have been one. Time wasn't breaking. It was practicing another rhythm. Mrs. Lang nodded toward the jar. "Give it to her," she said. I slid the note under the crown, then placed both on the towel beside the jar. The paper's corner brushed the glass, and the lake answered with a sigh that felt too wide to belong to water. The chain inside lifted like a ribbon caught by gentle wind. One end touched the crown. When it fell back, the words on the note had changed color, faint blue instead of graphite gray, as if the lake had rewritten them in its own ink. I leaned closer. The new words read, "Sleep guards you when you listen." Mrs. Lang smiled faintly. "She's changing the rule," she said, "turning it into a kindness." The air warmed again, then cooled. Our shadows doubled on the dock. Each of us had another, fainter version leaning a moment behind. "Why are there 2?" Liam whispered. "Because the lake blinked," I said, "like the picture." The woman's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then at me. "It's her," she said. "She says you're ready for the echo." "What echo?" I asked. She showed me the screen. The message was only 3 words. "Ask her name." "I already know it," I said. "Ask anyway," Mrs. Lang said. "Sometimes names change when they learn their purpose." I faced the water. "What is your name now?" I asked. The lullaby answered first, 3 notes rising, 1 falling. Then, in the small silence between ripples, a new voice came from beneath the boards. Not loud, not young, just right. "Clara Finch," it said, "and the other one who stayed." The lake stilled. "The other one?" I asked. "Every promise keeps 2, the voice said, the water carrying each syllable like a leaf. 1 to guard the sleep and 1 to wake it." Mrs. Lang touched my arm. "That would be you." The woman's eyes filled. "She's sharing the promise," she whispered. "You don't have to carry it alone." The voice softened. "Not alone, never alone." Then the surface folded once, like fabric settling after being shaken, and the reflection of the crown vanished from the jar. Only its shadow remained, gold on wood. The air around us thinned. The second set of shadows began to fade. The bells in town corrected themselves. 1, then 2, then the soft chime of 3. Time was finding its step again. "Did it work?" Liam asked quietly. "It's still working," I said. "It's remembering us." Mrs. Lang nodded toward the shore. "When the town begins to blink, it means the memory is spreading safely. Let's walk before it decides to repeat the day." We gathered the things. The jar was lighter, as if it had emptied some invisible weight. The note, now written in lake blue, stayed warm to the touch. Halfway to the field, we passed a man repainting a fence. He tipped his hat and said, "Pretty crown you've got there, Miss Clara." Then frowned, confused. "Sorry, I don't know why I said that." "It's all right," I said. "It suits the day." We kept walking. The town watched through its quiet windows, shutters lifting a second too soon, signs swaying without wind. Nothing menacing, just a world learning how to share one heartbeat between 2 times. That evening, I placed the crown and note back on the mantel. The jar sat empty beside them, clean, as though it had never touched water. When the clock reached 2:14, the hum began as usual, but it came from the window this time, not the floor. And for the first time, it harmonized with something inside the glass, a soft counterpoint that knew where it belonged. I went to the sill. 2 glasses of water waited side by side again. In the reflection, both glasses blinked. "Good night, Clara," I said. The hum settled into a single note and stayed there, like a heartbeat choosing rest. At dawn, the town's clock struck 13. once clear and deliberate. When I checked the mantel, the note had rewritten itself again. Beneath sleep guards you when you listen, a new line waits. Tomorrow, ask what woke the other one. Some promises split in two so they can survive. One keeps watch, one learns how to sleep. Tell me in the comments, if a younger version of you sat up at the foot of your bed tonight, what would you ask them first? By afternoon, everything felt normal enough to pass for ordinary. Birds took their turns on the wire. A delivery truck idled and moved. Even the bakery kept to its quiet rush. On my mantel, the note from Clara had shifted again. Beneath sleep guards you when you listen. A second line waited. Tomorrow, ask what woke the other one. The words looked like water had written them and then decided to hold still. I stood a long time with that sentence. Then I folded the note once, carefully, and slipped it into my pocket the way people tuck proof close to the body. I wanted to run to the lake. I wanted to call Mrs. Lang and ask for a rule I had not yet earned. Instead, I did small tasks and let time keep its shape. I washed 2 cups, though I had only used 1. I straightened the picture of the lighthouse in the hall that never stayed square. I set a glass of water on the sill and another on the dresser and waited to see which one chose to be a reflection. At 2:12 a.m., the hum arrived. Not from the floor, not from the window, from the thin air above my pillow, close enough to feel like breath without cold. I sat on the rug with my back to the bed frame, palms resting on my knees. I counted to 40 and back. The room stayed warm enough for a name. Clara, I said. Tomorrow I will ask you at the lake. Tonight I will ask the room. The hum softened and held one note that I could match with a quiet voice. I matched it until the rhythm in my chest agreed to be simple. What woke the other one? I asked. No words came back. A sound did. A slow inhalation that did not belong to my body. Close. Patient. A breath half a beat behind mine. The mirror above the dresser showed 2 glasses of water on the sill, both with the same small ripple along the rim, as if someone had just spoken a word that the glass wanted to remember. Are you the other one? I asked the reflection. The ripple stopped, then returned. Not yes. Not no. More like someone nodding while they think. I closed my eyes and let myself drift to the edge of sleep without falling. That half place where questions move more easily. The breath stayed near. It did not intrude. It kept time with me until I realized we were both following a third rhythm. The stairwell light outside my door hums on a frequency you can feel if you listen with your skin. I could feel it now, steady and thin, like a drawn string. It occurred to me that maybe the other one had always known that pitch. Maybe she had learned it long ago, on nights when the house was quiet, and I did not know I was keeping watch. Did I make you? I asked, the night she left. The breath moved from my left shoulder to my right, then back again, as if considering. Or did you make me? I added, to keep both of us from breaking what we promised not to break. The lullaby rose from under the bed, just one line, no words, our shape of a song. I did not say thank you out loud. I thought the word with care. I felt the air lighten, the way rooms do when someone receives a kindness without fuss. When I woke, sunlight had pressed a narrow rectangle of gold into the rug. I watched the light climb the bed frame like a person testing a ladder. I watched until it was high enough that I could stand without stepping through it. On the counter, I left a note for myself in pencil. Ask by the dock. Ask with Mrs. Lang beside you. Do not demand an answer that hurts the day. I folded the paper with the same weight I had given to the note on my mantel and tucked both into my bag. By late morning, the town had resumed its fond habit of being itself. Children passed a ball between the sycamores without misplacing the sun. A man in a clean shirt trimmed a hedge that did not need trimming and looked pleased anyway. A woman paused at the corner, as if she had forgotten what waiting felt like and wanted to practice. I met Mrs. Lang at the field. Her scarf was the color of the inside of a walnut shell. Her bicycle basket held the thermos and 2 cups, stacked and ready. "Your face looks more rested," she said. "Did the room say something kind?" "It breathed with me," I said, as if it had been doing that a long time and only now felt safe to be heard. "Then the question is ripe." "The question is strange," I said. "What woke the other one?" "Strange questions are only plain questions wearing the wrong shoes," she said. "Let us walk them to the right place." We were nearly to the line of pines when footsteps found us from behind. Quick, then cautious, then quick again. Liam, with a folded paper bag and a camera that looked old enough to have a favorite pocket. "I brought the shortbread, and I brought this," he said, lifting the camera a little, "in case you want someone else to hold memory for a minute." "Only if the lake agrees," I said. "The lake likes pictures," Mrs. Lang said. "It does not always like to be photographed." "Not the lake," Liam said. "You." The woman in the navy coat waited by the logs. Wind lifted the loose hair at her temples. She had that rested look that people wear after a difficult stretch of hours is finally past. "She says we are both early and late," the woman said. "She says that is all right." "It suits us," I said. We stopped at the first board. I did not step onto the dock, not yet. "Before I ask," I said to all of them, "I want to try something." I took the carnival photo from its tissue and laid it face down on the towel. The pencil circle on the back had closed by the width of a grain of salt. The gap still remained near the top, deliberate, a steady little opening. I rested my palm there and waited for whatever needed to happen next. Nothing dramatic moved. My pulse felt visible in my hand. The wood did what wood does. The water kept its breath. "Say the sentence," Mrs. Lang murmured. I did not need to look at the folded note to remember the words. "Tomorrow, ask what woke the other one." "What woke her?" I asked the lake softly. "What woke the one who stayed when the promise split?" The lullaby came from under the dock, then stopped. Then came again, softer, like a person trying to hum without waking the next room. "Please," I said, "tell me slowly." The air to my left thickened the way it had when the woman's sister stood at the pines and brought us a sentence from a phone. I did not turn. I let the sound do the turning for me. At first, there was nothing to translate, only a texture, a feeling through skin. A picture arrived next, only a slice of one. A bedroom I had not seen in years, a poster on a wall, corners taped, a jacket hung on a chair, sleeve turned a little, a window left open the width of a finger. The night we were 16, and the town had quieted itself in a way that made the streets look like a photograph of streets. We had whispered on the phone that night, floor to floor, the way girls do when they want to keep each other awake without stealing sleep. We had not said goodbye when the door shut below her for the last time. There had been no time. Moving happens to families the way rain happens to plans. In the picture, I saw something I did not remember remembering. My hand on my own blanket, held in a fist around nothing. I was awake in the picture, but not awake for myself. Awake for someone else. The breath beside me in the room last night had sounded like that. Not mine. Mine, but repurposed. I spoke what the picture showed because the lake seems to like being told what it has already offered. "I woke her," I said. I kept a part of me sitting up when the rest of me learned to lie down. I asked that part to stay long enough for both of us. The woman in the navy coat looked at my face with that open attention that does not ask for more than you can give. "She says yes," she said very quietly. "She says you did that without telling her because you wanted her to try sleeping without somebody listening for danger." The boards creaked one plank away, not from weight, from agreement. "What woke the other one?" I asked again, after all these years of keeping watch. The picture in my head changed rooms. Not the bedroom with the poster, the bookstore's break room, the scarred table, the parcel wrapped in plain paper, the notebook inside with the list of rules written in the hand we used to practice when we signed each other's names on pretend letters. The other picture came next, laid on top of the first the way you stack pages you need to keep in order. Mrs. Lang's hands around a cup, her eyes on the door and the window at once, her sentence in my living room. Not every jar is meant to be opened. Some show you how to carry them. I think a small kindness did it, I said. Not the lake, not the dock, not the rules. Someone speaking to the work and not to the fear. The lullaby slid down and held the low note the way a person holds the last step on a stair before stepping to the floor. I sat on the board with the towel between me and the wood and watched the water breathe. "Say the little word," Mrs. Lang said. "Thank you," I said to the plank, to the air, to the idea that a person can spend years keeping a room ready for a friend without becoming only the room. The chain in the jar, which I had not even noticed bringing, lifted one link and let it fall. Not a trick, a recital. "May I join the dock?" I asked the water, as myself, not as the watchful piece. The warmth along my forearms said yes in a language I was starting to read without help. I stepped onto the first plank. My shoe made the small sound that shoes make when they accept that wood has its own opinions about balance. Liam lifted his camera a notch, then lowered it. He had read the air correctly. Not a moment for capture, a moment for capacity. The woman stepped closer, so that we were three across with a fourth beside us that did not mind being counted and not seen. "What will you do with the other one now?" she asked, "since you know she is still here." "Invite her to rest," I said. "Teach her how to share the shift." "How do you do that?" she asked. I thought about all the nights I had not known I was working. I thought about the way I'd started saying please to my own rooms. I thought about the glass of water on the sill that had been raising another glass in the mirror, so I would not feel silly about leaving too. "I will do small things out loud," I said. "I will tell the room when I am safe. I will ask the other one if she wants to sit, and when she chooses to stay standing, I will thank her first, and then let her lean on the wall." "Good," Mrs. Lang said, and her voice sounded like a door closing gently against a soft night breeze. The town across the water chimed 12 at the proper hour. The 13th strike did not come. There are accidents even a patient town cannot repeat without becoming something else. "Will you write it down?" the woman asked. "For her. For yourself." "I will," I said, and felt another picture arrive. Not a memory, a suggestion. I saw a page with a title in Clara's mixed hand. Rules for Sharing the Night. The rules wrote themselves in my head with a calm I had not earned yet. Sit near where the air is softest. Say the time out loud when you wake. Leave a crumb of light for later. Drink water in twos. If the stairwell hum feels friendly, name it. If you feel watched, ask your own watchful part to blink. If the glass in the mirror raises a second glass, toast it. Thank the floorboards when they keep quiet. I smiled without realizing I had started. "Want to hear something odd?" Liam said in a voice as low as the lullaby's last note. "The shortbread tastes warmer than the cup." "That is the least odd thing you have said this week," Mrs. Lang replied. We stood there until the sun had shifted from middle to a point, a shy hand south of middle. We did not push for more. We did not settle for less. When we gathered the towel and the photo and the jar, the crown did something a plain object sometimes does when it becomes exact for a second. It looked new. I slid it into the shoebox as if it had asked to go home. On the walk back, we passed the man with the hedge. He had moved on to sweeping a path that did not need sweeping. People like to be useful to a day that has decided to be tender. At the corner, the old firehouse clock hesitated before it changed its number. You could see the hand think, then choose. That pause pleased me. "How do you feel?" the woman asked as we reached the field. Like someone gave my lungs an extra place to sit, I said. Bring that feeling tomorrow, she said. She wants to try something she calls the quiet set. I do not know what that means, but she sounded certain. Quiet and certain is our brand, I said. The woman smiled. Then I will see you by the logs, she said, and walked toward town with that practiced, unhurried step that tells the day you will not let it hurry you twice. Back at my apartment, the stairwell light hummed its two-note hum. I locked the door. Then I unlocked it and locked it again so my hands would feel the difference. On the mantel, I set the crown and the photo side by side. I placed the jar between them. I put fresh water on the sill and said the time out loud. 9:17. I wrote the title on the first page of a plain notebook. Rules for sharing the night. I wrote the list. I added one more. If you forget which one you are, touch the old bakery lid and listen. You will hear the day clap softly once. The room brightened at the edges, the way rooms do when they approve without wanting credit for it. I brushed my teeth. I folded the blanket over the foot of the bed for the other one to borrow. I turned the lamp low. I sat on the rug and waited for the note. At 2:14 a.m., the hum did not come. At 2:15, it did. Only once. Just enough to say, I am here, I know your plan, I agree. I slept. I did not dream. When morning found the mantel, the carnival photo had faced itself down again. On the back, beneath the almost circle, a new sentence had been written in pencil that looked like light. Bring the watch you kept by accident. I knew where it was. Top drawer. An old wristwatch with a cracked leather band, set 5 minutes fast for years, because once I had learned to keep time for 2. I lifted the watch and held it to my ear. It ticked in 2 rhythms at once, as if it had been waiting for us to notice. Some objects learn your heartbeat. A few teach it back to you in a quieter voice. Tell me in the comments, do you own something that seems to keep time with your day, like a favorite clock or phone alarm that feels almost alive? The wristwatch lay in my palm, like a small, patient creature. Cracked leather band. Fine scratches around the face where the glass has met years of doors and desks. I had set it 5 minutes fast, back when keeping time for 2 felt safer than being exactly on time for 1. When I lifted it to my ear, I heard the double tick again. 2 rhythms sharing one small case. The sound made my breathing slow to match. I slid the watch into my pocket and stood a moment at the mantel. The carnival photo rested face down beside the paper crown, both steady, as if they had decided to stay put on my behalf. The jar sat between them, empty and clean. I had the sense that emptiness could also be a kind of work. I filled a glass for the window and spoke the time aloud so the room would hear me claim the hour. 9:21. The stairwell light hummed its 2-note hum, friendly as a neighbor. Mrs. Lang waited by the curb with her bicycle. Today her scarf was pond green, quiet and calm. You look less rushed, she said. The watch helps, I said. It sounds like it knows where we are going. Then let it ride in your pocket where it can listen, she said. Some things work best when they feel included. We walked the familiar route. The town felt practical again. No extra strikes of the bell, no second shadows. The bakery door chimed once for each customer and stopped there. When we passed the old firehouse, the clock faced noon with clean confidence. I took that as permission to keep the day simple. Liam met us at the field. He carried the shortbread again and a small metal thermos that looked inherited. Family tea, he said. Licorice and mint. My grandmother swore it made grief behave. It might, Mrs. Lang said, pleased. Anything that reminds a room to soften has merit. The woman in the navy coat stood near the logs. Her hair was braided back today, a practical gesture that made me think this hour would ask us to listen more than speak. She says thank you for coming without making a ceremony of it, the woman said. She says to try the quiet set. What is the quiet set? Liam asked. It is a way of listening, I said. 1 sense at a time. She asked for it yesterday. The dock waited with its silver boards and its ordinary creak. I set my bag down, then placed the plain towel near the first plank like a small stage for simple things. On the towel I set the watch, the paper crown, and the folded note with the lake blue sentence, "Sleep guards you when you listen." We stayed on the shore. Mrs. Lang poured tea and lifted the lid so the steam could step into the air. "You first," she said to me, and nodded toward the watch. I picked it up and held it near my ear. Tick. Then the faint twin tick, a breath behind. I closed my eyes. Sound makes shapes if you let it take its time. The first tick sounded like a pin on a map. The second felt like a thumb placed beside it. I matched my breathing to the paired beats. On the third breath, the lake let its own rhythm rise underneath, not waves. A slow inhale across the planks, then a matching exhale that did not disturb a single leaf along the shore. "Say the time," Mrs. Lang whispered. 12:07, I said, and the watch changed nothing, but I did. My chest settled into the part of the hour that includes other hearts. The woman drew closer and watched my face with the quiet attention that has helped this whole project learn to be kind. "She says the second rhythm belongs to the part of you that used to keep watch alone," she said softly. "She says you can invite it to sit without asking it to disappear." I opened my eyes. "Would you like to sit?" I asked the small piece of air that had begun to feel like a person who stands at doors and listens for rain. A breeze moved over my forearm, warm, a yes that did not need to be grand. "Good," Mrs. Lang said. "That is the first movement of a quiet set. Sound invites, not insists." We took our turns. Liam lifted the watch to his ear and smiled like a person does when a song he forgot he loved arrives at the grocery store. "It helps me not make noise with my thinking," he said. The woman listened last. She closed her eyes and swayed a very small amount, almost not at all. "She says it is clean today," she murmured. "She says the lake has stopped trying to hurry the hour." I set the watch back on the towel. The second movement would be touch. I placed my fingers on the first board without leaning my weight into it. Wood under sun holds its own warmth like a memory. The plank gave a little under my hand, honest and simple, the way furniture yields when it trusts the person sitting down. "Permission," I said to the dock, a word I have learned to use when I am uncertain which voice belongs to me. The board answered with a small sound that was not a creak so much as a sigh, not from age, from agreement. "Step," Mrs. Lang said. I stepped onto the first plank. The sound pleased me. It was the same sound my shoe had made yesterday. Some days ask for variety. Some ask for continuity. This one liked sameness first. The woman handed me the paper crown. "Hold it for the third movement," she said. "Sight is next." I set the crown on the towel and looked through its open points at the jar. Empty glass filters light with more opinions than water does. What I saw through the crown looked like a line of small suns on wood. "Look slowly," Mrs. Lang reminded. "Sight is the loudest sense. Ask it to whisper." I lowered my gaze to the seam between two planks. In that thin dark, I saw a single pale pebble. Nothing special, except that it was not there yesterday, and it had the ring of white that has followed us from summer to now. "I see you," I said to the pebble. "You do not have to be a sign. You can just be yourself." The ring inside the stone brightened by a degree, then settled. I took that as thanks. We did not hurry the next movements. Scent arrived as licorice steam and cedar and the clean mineral trace that belongs to this water. Taste arrived as shortbread that somehow felt warmer than the tea again. Liam smiled at that. The town likes its running jokes, and so do we. Touch returned in a new way when the watch shifted on the towel as if adjusting a sleeve. I picked it up. "May I set you to the right time?" I asked quietly. Not fast. Not slow. Just us. The second tick deepened. Not louder. Sure. I turned the crown carefully. The hands moved without resistance, like a person who has agreed to change their schedule because it will help someone they love rest easier. I stopped at 12:23. Liam checked the firehouse clock from where he stood and nodded. "True enough," he said. The woman glanced at her phone. "She says that is right for both," she said. "She says the part of the day you cannot see uses the same number." "Then the watch is a bridge," I said. "Not between worlds. Between chores." "Say the truth out loud," Mrs. Lang replied. "Truth becomes more helpful when it hears its name." "The second rhythm is mine," I said. "I set it to the hour so it can rest when I rest." The watch settled into a single tick. The twin did not vanish. It softened into the first, the way two voices can find unison and enjoy it. We sat on the boards with our feet on the shore and let time be simple for a while. No one tried to make meaning where quiet suited better. The lake accepted our stillness and offered its own. After a few minutes, the woman spoke in that careful tone she uses when she is carrying a sentence that did not start with her. "She says the next part is the asking," the woman said. "No riddle. Just one plain question." "Ask," I said. "What woke the other one?" I answered without looking for new pictures. The reply had formed last night and needed to be spoken with both feet on the ground. "Someone spoke to the work instead of the fear," I said, and I believed them. That believing did the waking. The woman nodded. "That is what she said," she murmured. "She wanted to hear you say it with your feet on the dock." Mrs. Lang poured the last of the tea into the lid and set it on the towel for the air to drink. "Then the quiet set is complete," she said. "Hear, touch, see, breathe, ask, thank." We packed slowly. The towel went into my bag, still warm in one corner. The crown went into the shoebox. The watch returned to my pocket where its tick could make friends with my pulse. We stepped back from the dock. The boards settled. The pebble in the seam kept its ring of white without asking to be more important than a pebble. On the path to the pines, the town leaned closer in its gentle way. A boy paused his bike at the logs and looked at us with a curiosity that was not intrusive. "Are you making the lake calmer?" he asked. "We are letting it keep us company," I said. "Thank you," he replied, very serious, the way children thank people who just made a rule they can trust. We crossed back into the field. The grass laid itself down in little lines where our feet had passed. When we reached the street, the first bell of the hour sounded right on time. The second did not feel the need to argue. Liam walked with us to the bakery. He bought stamps, then came out as if nothing could be more normal than buying stamps on a day that had been good to all of us. "Do you feel different?" he asked as we paused at the corner. "Lighter in the way a string feels lighter when it is tuned," I said. "Not less tight. More useful. Keep the watch where it can hear you breathe," he said. "It likes the job." "I will," I said. He squeezed my shoulder and went toward the shop with the easy purpose of a person who knows which shelf will need them next. Mrs. Lang and I stood a moment longer. "Good work," she said. "Not dramatic. Durable." "That is what I want," I said. "A day I can carry tomorrow." She smiled. "Then let us go home the long way." Corners are friends to a person who just changed a rule. We took an extra block. The houses wore their porches like small stages for plants and shoes. The wind lifted a wind chime once and stopped so the note could finish without fuss. At my building door, Mrs. Lang touched the frame with 2 fingers. "Bless the hinge," she said out of habit. "It has learned your weight." I unlocked the door. I locked it again. Then I left it unlocked for the second it takes to put down a bag and choose a room. It pleased me to give the door a full sentence. Inside, I set the shoebox on the mantel between the photo and the jar. I placed the watch beside them, face up, where I could hear the tick without needing to move closer. The room was approved with a small brightness around the lamp's shade that I felt rather than saw. I wrote 3 new lines in the notebook labeled "Rules for Sharing the Night." Let sound go first. Set the hour. Teach the fast part of you to hum. I made tea and let it steep too long. Sometimes tea prefers to be strong. I drank it anyway and felt no need to correct it. Evening found the window. I set a glass on the sill and spoke the time for the room. 9:41. The watch ticked along and seemed pleased to be part of the conversation. At 2:14 a.m., the hum did not arrive. My eyes opened anyway. The watch ticked steady. A second sound joined it from the dresser. Not the jar, the carnival photo. It clicked once as if a tiny fingernail had touched the corner. I turned it over. On the back, the pencil circle had closed by another hair. Below the lake blue line, a new sentence waited in light gray, as if the page had whispered it to itself and then decided to let me share it. Bring the chalk from the old school steps. I sat up and smiled at the accuracy of the ask. I knew where it was. Top drawer of my desk. A stub wrapped in paper. We had kept it as a souvenir when the school replaced the slate with a whiteboard. We had called it a relic because that sounded important and made us careful without having to feel solemn. The watch ticked. The stairwell hum kept its 2 notes. The room stayed warm. Quiet set tomorrow with chalk, I whispered. We will let our hands learn the new song. The glass on the sill showed a second glass in its reflection. Both lifted a fraction in a small shared toast. As I reached to turn down the lamp, the watch's second hand paused on the 12 for a heartbeat, then moved on. And in that pause, I heard Clara's voice as clear as water. Draw the circle small enough to fit both of us. Some places know how to finish your sentences. Others draw a circle around them and wait for you to step inside. Tell me in the comments, if you had 1 piece of chalk and 1 clean stone, what quiet message would you leave for tomorrow to find? The chalk was still where I'd hidden it years ago, wrapped in brown paper with my handwriting on the fold. A stub taken from the old school steps when they tore out the slate. It fit my palm the way a pebble does when a walk is going well. On the mantel, the watch ticked at a calm pace, 1 rhythm instead of 2. The carnival photo rested face down beside the paper crown. Between them, the glass jar sat clean and untroubled, as if it had retired from its old job and found a gentler one. I filled a glass for the window. 9:32, I said to the room so the hour would feel held. The stairwell light hummed its 2 notes in the hall, steady as a neighbor clearing their throat before a hello. When I stepped outside, Mrs. Lang was already on the curb with her bicycle. Her scarf today was the soft gray of sidewalk chalk after rain. "You brought it?" she said, eyes on my pocket. "I did," I said. "She wants a circle small enough for both of us." "Good," she replied. "Small circles keep their promises." We walked the long way on purpose. Milford had put itself neatly together again. A window cleaner whistled a plain tune. The bakery door chimed and stopped. The firehouse clock changed its face without that thoughtful pause it sometimes takes. Even in order, the town felt attentive, as if it had pulled its chair a little closer to our day. Liam waited at the field with the shortbread and his small thermos. He had slipped the watch into his pocket for the walk and handed it back to me with a little nod, the way a person returns a folded note and does not read your face. The woman in the navy coat stood near the logs. Her braid lay over one shoulder. Her phone stayed in her pocket. "She says today is for the chalk," she said. "Not for talking. She says the town will listen and the lake will answer with its hands." "Then we keep the hour simple," I said. We crossed under the pines together. The lake appeared in that sudden way it has, all water at once. The dock waited, boards silvered, nails patient. A single gull skimmed the surface, then rose twice, as if repeating itself had become a comfort. I set the towel on the first plank. On it, I placed the chalk, the watch, and the folded note with the lake blue line. "Sleep guards you when you listen." Mrs. Lang poured tea into the thermos lid and lifted it to the air. Steam drifted toward the water, a politeness the kind that never asks anything back. We did not step onto the dock yet. The woman looked toward town, then down to the boards, then to me. "She says start on the shore," she murmured. "Let the ground remember before the wood does." I knelt at the line where sand turns to plank. The chalk felt cool in my hand, the paper wrapping worn thin where fingers had worried it each time I checked that it still existed. "Small," I said, mostly to myself. I drew a circle no wider than the watch face. The line met itself, then lifted a hair, leaving a thumb-width gap near the top. Permission. The way the chalk circle under my bed had left a small opening for whatever needed to pass without breaking the shape. The lake took a slow breath. The ring of water at the edge lifted and settled, then held still the way a person does when someone else is speaking. I placed the watch inside the chalk. The tick sounded louder there, or maybe only closer. A heartbeat in a white ring. "Sight next," Mrs. Lang said. Not as a rule, more as a rhythm. Through the chalk circle, the planks lined up straighter than they had all week. The seam between boards ran true for 3 long lines, then shifted back to their usual uneven stitch once the circle ended. A small correction, existing only where we had given the day a reason to align. "Do you see it?" the woman asked quietly. "I do," I said. "It is cooperating." Liam stood a few steps back and watched our faces like someone learning a new language by reading its listeners. "May I place something?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and he set the paper crown beside the circle, its points turned toward the lake, not inside. Beside, a witness. The quiet deepened. The gull did not cry again. A far lawnmower paused, then chose another direction. On the lake, a set of ripples spread in a deliberate pattern. A slow circle within a circle, water learning to trace chalk. "Smell," Mrs. Lang said, almost under her breath. "Licorice, steam, cedar. That clean mineral at the back of the tongue that belongs to this shoreline. And something else, faint. The powdered stone scent you notice when a classroom goes still." "The school," I said. "The steps." The woman nodded. "She says you brought enough of that day with you that the air can read it." I lifted the chalk and drew a second circle on the first plank. Same size, same small gap. The line looked brighter on wood than on sand, a thread of small moonlight on a gray board. The dock answered with one tiny sound. Not a creak, the natural complaint of a board settling into work. Agreement, the way a shoulder makes a sound when it is ready to carry a bag again. I set the watch in the center of that second circle. Tick, tick, tick. The tick seemed to grow a tail, a faint echo that followed half a breath behind. Not 2 rhythms this time. One rhythm and its reflection, traveling together. "Listen," the woman said, her voice a shade lower. From behind us, the town gave back a soft reply. A window latch clicked. A bike bell chimed once. The firehouse clock moved its minute hand and let the distance between ticks match the watch exactly, as if a building had leaned forward to hear a wrist. The lake touched the planks in a series of small, even beats. Water can count when it wants to. It counted now. I drew a third circle, small as the first 2 on the second plank. Watch, then crown, then note. We placed the paper crown in that circle and tucked the folded line beneath one point so the blue words looked toward the water. "Sleep guards you when you listen." The crown's shadow fell into the chalk ring and softened there, edges less sharp, as if the circle preferred to keep even shadows comfortable. "Ask," Mrs. Lang said. "Clara," I said to the water, the boards, the air that had learned our names without making us prove them. "Show us how the world remembers you." Not as a picture, as a way of keeping time. The lake drew in a breath. The breeze on my cheek cooled, then warmed, then stilled. In the jar, which I had not reached for, a faint ring formed near the base. No water inside it, only light shaped by glass. The first sign came from town. The bakery door chimed 3 notes that belonged to the lullaby. Inside, someone laughed softly at their own surprise. A train horn far away picked up the same 3 notes and carried them across the flats, patient and low. On the dock, the chalk line on the first plank brightened again, just once, enough to make the circle look new. The watch ticked at ease. The paper crown turned a fraction in a breeze I did not feel on my skin. Not a trick, a courtesy, the way people turn more toward a speaker when the story matters. In the jar's glass, the reflection of the crown flickered and settled with its shadow facing the lake. 2 crowns now held the same pose, one in paper, one in light. "Next," the woman whispered, as if she were listening to someone speaking through a hallway. She says, "Draw the 4th circle where you would have sat at 16, knees over water." I moved to the 3rd plank and drew the circle near the edge. Small again. Same gap near the top. I did not place anything inside it. My hand hovered over the blank center and rested, not touching the wood, not holding away either. The wind brought a smell I had not felt since that summer. Sun on wet hair, shampoo from the kind of bottle we bought with pocket money and shared without measuring. A clean note that belonged to a kitchen where someone had dried towels in neat stacks. I looked up. Across the lake, a row of windows reflected back not trees, not sky, but the easy sway of a denim sleeve. Not a person. The shape of a memory fitting itself into the present just enough to keep me from saying the wrong name out loud. The chalk at the tiny gap smudged itself closed, then opened again. Not indecision. A breath. "She is here," I said. "Yes," the woman replied. She asked the town to keep its voice low. We stood without speaking. Liam poured more tea as if we were all on a porch and not at a dock. He set a biscuit in the sand for the air. Birds did not rush. Ants found it later with respectable discipline. Time settled around us, not heavy. Minded? A bell in town waited an extra half-second before it chimed, so our own watches could arrive at the hour together. I drew the 5th circle, small again, on the shore beside the plank, and set the jar inside it. Empty glass, no chain, no water, just light. The jar did not glow. It held light the way a hand holds a bird, careful, quiet. A ring formed on the sand where the jar met its own shadow. Circle within circle, a memory with its own margin. "Tell us then," I said, not sure which direction I was speaking to, not sure that it mattered. "How does the world remember you without making you vanish into it?" The answer did not come in a voice. It came in arrangements. A breeze moved across the lake and planted a small series of ripples in a ring that repeated ours. On the far shore, 2 empty chairs turned toward each other a little, as if a pair of neighbors had both thought of the same story at once. In the reflection of the bakery window, 2 glasses lifted and set down together, though only one stood on the sill inside. The dock echoed our circles, board by board, one small flash at each ring, no sound loud enough to begin, each brightening the right amount to be seen and then to forget itself. Mrs. Lang touched the chalk with 2 fingers. "Enough for today," she said. "Let the world keep a few pieces so we do not have to carry all of them home." I nodded. We did not wipe away the circles. We left them to fade in their own time. The small gaps would offer the lake a door for whatever it wanted to send back later. As we gathered the towel and the crown, the watch gave one extra tick, a friendly nudge. The minute hand did not move. It had only wanted to greet the dock. On the path to the pines, the boy with the bike appeared again. He took off his cap and put it back on. "Is the chalk for school?" he asked. "It is for remembering," I said. He thought about that, then nodded like someone signing for a package that he would open at home. The town seemed to breathe with us as we crossed the field. Leaves shifted once and rested. A dog looked up from a porch and watched us pass without bark or fuss. At the corner, the old firehouse clock gave a tiny mechanical sigh as it found the next minute. The sound pleased me for no good reason other than that it belonged. Back at my building, Mrs. Lang touched the doorframe with 2 fingers. "Bless the hinge," she said, then smiled when I said it with her. Inside, the mantel looked ready. I set the jar between the crown and the photo again. The watch went on the towel near the glass, where it could listen to my rooms keeping their hours. I unwrapped the chalk and placed it by the notebook labeled "Rules for Sharing the Night." I added a new page and wrote slowly. Draw small circles on ordinary days. Leave the gap. Place the things that keep time inside. If the town replies, thank it and do not chase. Evening asked for tea. I said yes. The water hummed on the stove in a pitch that matched the stairwell light, the way some households learn to sing to themselves when nobody is trying. At 2:14, the room did not hum. My eyes opened because they wanted to, not because anything pulled. On the dresser, the carnival photo clicked once, that polite fingernail sound it uses when it has something both true and small to offer. I turned it over. The pencil circle on the back had closed by another hair, and beneath the lake blue line, a new sentence had appeared, faint at first, then steadier, as if the paper had learned confidence. Bring the chalk to the old school steps, early, before people. Let the town finish the circle for you. I sat with that until I could feel my own morning lift its head. The watch ticked, content. The glass on the sill showed 2 reflections again, both raising themselves in that tiny toast that had stopped feeling strange. "Early then," I said to the room. "We will let the town draw." The stairwell light hummed its note. A door down the hall clicked and settled. The night held its quiet, and I let it. I slept, and for once there was a dream only of walking down the center of a hallway that did not need guarding. The other one matched my pace, then took my hand, then let go and walked beside me, easier now, the work shared. I woke before the alarm and put the chalk in my pocket. The watch felt warm from the night. The jar was empty and proud of it, the way an old cup can be proud when it has learned that being clean is also a form of service. The sky was the pale blue of first hours. The town's birds had not started their proper concert. Only one sang a note and waited for a reply it already knew would come. At the school steps, the stone held a memory of chalk dust, even after all these years. I knelt and set the stub on the cold surface. Then I heard it. Not a voice. A soft scrape from the far edge, like a piece of chalk meeting stone with someone else's hand. A second circle began there, faint and careful, 2 inches away from mine. It moved toward me with quiet purpose, as if a person stood out of sight and drew the other half while I drew mine. I did not look up. I did not rush. I met the line where it wanted to meet, and we stopped with a thumb-width gap touching a thumb-width gap, twin openings aligned, 2 doors that could be closed without force whenever we both agreed. The chalk in my fingers warmed. On my wrist, the watch ticked once, then paused for the length of a breath, then continued, as if acknowledging that the town had taken a turn and done it kindly. A shadow fell over the stone, not over me. I kept still. The smell of sun on wet hair found my cheek again. Denim sleeve, easy movement. a presence that knew how to be near without taking. "Good morning," I whispered. My voice did not echo. It landed inside the ring and stayed. When I lifted the chalk, the two gaps closed on their own with a dry, soft sound, and the finished circle held a single word, pale as breath. Soon. Some promises are not broken. They simply wait until we grow quiet enough to hear what they were really asking of us. Tell me, if a friend from your past could send you one word across time, what word would it be? Morning in Milford was made of mist and memory, the kind that doesn't cling. It drifts between houses, listens, and keeps going. I walked the familiar path from the school steps to the square, the chalk stub still in my pocket, soft with warmth as if it remembered my hand from the night before. Every sound felt wrapped in gauze. Footsteps on brick, the slow pull of a shop's metal shutter. Even the bell over the bakery door seemed to test the air before ringing. I passed the cafe, where Clara and I once dared each other to write our futures on napkins, folded, hidden under sugar jars, never read. Back then, we believed that saying a wish out loud might ruin it. Now silence seemed to be the only language left that still kept its shape. Mrs. Lang's window glowed from across the street, curtains breathing in the draft. She waved once, a shadow of a smile under her reading glasses, then went back to watering her fern. It was a comfort knowing she was near, not watching, but tuned to the same wavelength of quiet. I reached the park gate and paused. A child's voice counted softly from somewhere behind the hedges. 1, 2, 3, then stopped before 4, as if uncertain whether to keep going. It was a kind of pause Clara used to make when she lost her place in a story and didn't want to admit it. The bench by the lake was still damp with dew. I sat and took the watch from my pocket. It was ticking steadily, but the minute hand had slipped a little backward, just enough to make the hour uncertain. When I tilted it toward the light, a faint smear ran along the inside of the glass. Not dirt, not scratch, a curved mark like a fingerprint left in fog. It wasn't mine. I wiped it once, gently, and it stayed. I tried not to think about it. Instead, I unfolded the old note. Sleep guards you when you listen. I'd read it a dozen times now, but the words still bent differently with every hour. That morning, they sounded less like comfort and more like instruction. The sound of gravel drew my eyes to the right. Liam was walking toward me, hands deep in his coat pockets, a paper bag tucked under his arm. "I brought you these," he said, handing me a pair of thin white gloves. "They're for the chalk. Your hands are starting to look like the steps again." I smiled, slipping them on. He sat beside me, elbows on knees, quiet. After a moment he said, "My grandmother used to say that people leave promises in the air, and the wind decides when to deliver them. Maybe this is that kind of promise." "Maybe," I said, watching the lake wrinkle in the faint wind. Then, after a pause, "But I don't remember making one." He looked at me, not surprised. "Maybe she does." I turned the watch again, and the fingerprint gleamed faintly. This time I traced it with my thumb. Something stirred behind my ribs, a flicker of memory not yet formed. A hallway with sunlit tiles, the smell of glue and chalk, two shadows overlapping near a door. Her voice had said something. I was sure of it, but the words wouldn't come. "What if?" I said, still staring at the watch. "It wasn't about remembering her. What if it was about remembering me?" Liam frowned. "How do you mean?" "The way we used to be," I said softly. "How I used to listen. Before everything started moving so fast. Maybe that's what she wanted me to come back for." He nodded slowly, as if weighing the truth in it. "Or maybe it's both," he said. "She remembers you, and you remember her. And that's how the promise stays alive, neither of you letting it close." The thought made the air shift around us. It wasn't cold, just aware. I stood and walked to the edge of the lake, the gloves still on my hands. Something pale caught my eye in the shallows, a bit of paper, half buried in silt. I reached down and lifted it carefully. It was thin, lined, folded once. When I opened it, the ink was smeared, but 2 words were clear enough to read: "Find the other half." The rest of the paper dissolved in my fingers, leaving faint gray dust on the gloves. The watch ticked once, sharp, clean, like a heartbeat too close to the ear. Liam stepped beside me. "What did it say?" "Half of something," I murmured. "But I don't know what." The woman in the navy coat appeared on the far side of the dock. She didn't call out, just lifted her hand, a small, deliberate gesture, and pointed toward the old school building on the hill. Its roofline shimmered in the mist, almost translucent. I nodded without knowing why, and she lowered her hand. Her braid glinted once in the light before she turned and walked away. "She's showing you where the promise lives," Liam said quietly. "I think she's showing me where it stopped," I answered. We walked back toward town together. At the first corner, he turned left, and I continued alone up the hill. The old school loomed ahead, its stone walls veined with moss, the steps still faintly marked with the circles from yesterday's chalk. But there was something new. In the middle of the top step, where our 2 circles had met, someone had drawn a faint line connecting them, a bridge of chalk only an inch long. At its center was a small mark shaped like a half-heart. When I touched it, the chalk felt warm, not hot, alive. A memory unfolded slowly, piece by piece, like a film reel catching light again. Clara and I were 16, sitting on those very steps, rain just beginning to fall, the smell of stone and wet notebooks in the air. She'd been quiet for a long time before speaking. "If one of us ever forgets," she had said, "the other one has to draw a circle. Just one. Not to bring back what's lost, just to hold it still long enough to listen." And then she'd smiled, that sideways, secret smile of hers, and added, "Promise?" I'd said yes, I'd meant it, but I never drew the circle. Not until now. The memory faded. The watch ticked once, loud, then twice, soft. I slipped it back into my pocket and looked toward the lake. For a moment, I thought I saw her. Not a ghost, not a reflection, just the way morning light sometimes gathers into a shape you recognize before reason catches up. She wasn't waiting. She was watching the steps. Then she turned and walked into the mist, calm, certain. The air behind her shimmered faintly, like a curtain being drawn between worlds that still share the same draft. I ran my hand across the chalk line between the 2 circles. It smudged slightly under my touch, and for an instant, I felt something pulse beneath the stone. A second heartbeat, far away, but in rhythm with my own. When I lifted my hand, a word had appeared where the chalk line had been. "Listen," and beneath it, in fainter dust, another. "Almost." I stood there a long while, the town waking behind me, the watch ticking quietly in my pocket, the air tasting of morning and memory and something unfinished, like a promise still humming between 2 half-remembered hearts. As I turned to leave, the bell over the school door rang once, though no one had opened it, and somewhere beyond the hill, a voice that might have been hers whispered my name, softly, as if inviting me to remember the rest. Some answers arrive as sound before they become words. If you could hear 1 hour of your life again, perfectly clear, which hour would you choose? Tell me in the comments which moment you would replay and why. Would you choose a happy hour or the one that still needs listening? The school bell had rung once with no hand on the rope. My name had followed in a voice that was not wind. "Almost," the chalk had said. Listen. That afternoon, the town kept time like a careful pianist. No skipped ticks, no extra chime. Even the bus brakes sighed in the same spot at the corner, as if that small breath belonged to the day. I carried the chalk in my pocket and the watch in my palm. The glass held a faint curve of fog on the inside, right where a thumb might rest. It would not wipe away. It felt like a signature left by someone who had used my time with care. On the mantel, the crown and the carnival photo looked settled, the jar between them doing its quiet work of being empty on purpose. I placed the watch beside the jar long enough to hear the tick inside the room. It matched the stairwell hum through the wall almost exactly now. Two neighbors in tune. I brewed tea and took a cup to Mrs. Lang. She opened her door before I knocked. "You have listening to do," she said, smiling softly. "Let me lend you a cushion and a story that does not belong to me." I stepped inside. Her apartment smelled like dried mint and a spine of old paper. She handed me a small blue cushion with little white stitches and settled in her chair. "When I was 19, she said, I kept time for a person who had just learned to be afraid of sleep. I thought my job was to stay awake. I learned later that my job was to teach the room how to keep watch so I could return to being a person. The room was better at it than I was. You can trust good rooms." "How?" I asked. "Do you teach a room?" "Simple courtesies," she said. "Speak the hour. Set a glass where light can find it. Use one sound you return to every night so the house has a note to hum when you forget. Praise the floor when it stays quiet. Handle doors gently, and they will learn your hands." I held the cushion and tried to imagine a town learning the same lesson at scale. Milford had already begun. "Tonight," she said, "I will be awake with my lamp on. You will not need me, but the hallway will like the company." "Thank you," I said. She touched my sleeve. "And thank you for choosing kindness as your method. It is slower, but it lasts." On my way back, Liam called across the street. He had a small parcel under his arm, and the look of a person who has decided to make himself useful without waiting to be asked. "Picked up prints," he said, lifting the parcel, "from the carnival negative you found." He paused, then added, "It was tucked at the back of the envelope. The shop said it still held just enough information to try." He lowered his voice. "I asked for one copy. It felt right." At my kitchen table, we unwrapped the parcel together. A single new print lay inside. Same painted moon, same crooked stars. Two girls with eyes closed, ready to listen. Only one difference. The gap of space between our shoulders had narrowed by a whisper. In the first photo, a sliver of backdrop showed between us. In the new one, the backdrop had softened to the color of our clothes, as if the picture had remembered we were closer than it had recorded. Liam exhaled. "Is that possible?" he asked. "Possible is wide today," I said. "True," he said, and packed the print back into its paper as if tucking in a child. The woman in the navy coat texted just after dusk. She rarely used words. Tonight, she sent 4. Quiet set. Roof of school. I typed back, listening, bringing watch and chalk. Her reply came at once. Bring empty jar too. I stood a moment with the open message. The jar had retired, or so I thought. Then I remembered what Mrs. Lang had said. Not every jar is meant to be opened. Some show you how to carry them. The empty jar would hear what we heard, and that would be enough. I wrapped the jar in the kitchen towel, slipped the chalk into my coat pocket, and set the watch where I could feel it against my wrist. On the sill, I left one glass of water for the room and spoke the hour. 9:20. The stairwell hum answered as if pleased to be counted. Outside, Milford walked slowly toward evening. A child drew a hopscotch grid on the sidewalk and left one square empty at the top. A woman in a red sweater set a bowl of apples on a porch step. The old firehouse clock blinked once, the way a mechanical thing sometimes does when it stretches. Then it found the next minute. At the school, the air held that faint powdered stone scent again, like the inside of old notebooks. The steps kept both of yesterday's chalk circles with their twin gaps. Between them, a thin, invisible bridge made my palm warm when I held it there. The woman waited by the side door. She had a small flashlight and a ring of keys that did not look borrowed. "She says the roof will like you tonight," the woman said. "She says to keep your feet close to the middle. The edges are for birds and words." We climbed the narrow stairwell, listening to our own breath and the simple iron ring of each step. On the roof, the town lay open below, a map made of windows and little sounds. We set the jar on a square of folded blanket near the middle. I placed the watch beside it. The chalk stayed in my pocket, a quiet promise. "Tell me what today gave you," the woman said. Her voice changed slightly when she asked for something on her sister's behalf. It took on the steadiness of someone translating from a language she did not want to bruise. "Almost," I said, "and the bell with no hand, and the print that closed the gap a little." "She liked that," the woman said. "The closing." She said the town learned a new courtesy. We stood with that. I did not ask questions that would make the hour chase itself. I let it arrive. Mrs. Lang's lamp was already on down the hill, a single square of warm in the darker slope. The bakery cooled its ovens. Steam curled from the roof vent like a small ghost that smelled of sugar and staying. At the lake, a calm jug of water, the size of a house, breathed. The watch ticked. The jar was still. The air encouraged both. "Quiet set," the woman said. "One sense at a time." I closed my eyes. Sound first. A distant train, not approaching, not leaving, keeping a line. Leaves doing their soft clapping in the high branches. The stairwell light from my building humming in memory from here, as if the roof had borrowed it for the night. "Breathe," the hour said without words. I did, and the watch matched me. Touch. Gravel under the thin soles of my shoes. The roof warm from the day's last light. The jar cool against my fingers. The way clean glass can cool a person without making them feel alone. Sight. When I opened my eyes, the town had shifted by an inch toward kind. Not a trick, a choice. 2 windows on opposite streets flashed once and settled, as if greeting each other gently. A man on a porch set his book down, then looked up, then smiled, not at anyone in particular, but at the exact angle the evening had achieved. Scent. Stone dust. Damp slate. A faint, friendly trace in the air that belonged to Clara at 16. A shared shampoo and sun on wet hair. Taste. Tea from a thermos the woman pulled from her bag, bittersweet with that border herb that keeps grief from needing a stage. Ask, what woke the other one? The woman said again, softly, because that was the question of the season. Kind speech toward the work, I said, and a town willing to lower its voice. Good, she said, and then stood quietly, head tilted, as if listening to a hallway at the end of the day. We waited. The roof asked nothing else of us. The jar accepted the hour. The watch kept my pulse company without trying to lead. Then the first new thing happened. Far below, the school bell sounded half a strike. Not a full note, a begun note. It hung in the air like a bead on a string. On my wrist, the second hand paused on the 12, held there for the length of one slow breath, then moved on. "Do you hear it?" the woman asked. "I do," I said. "It is the hour learning to speak carefully." She nodded. "She says to try the chalk now. Small, not at the edge." I took the stub from my pocket and knelt, then drew a circle no larger than a coin in the gravel at the center of the roof. I left the gap. I placed nothing inside. The town replied at once, not with sound, with order. 3 porch lights came on together along the west street, the bakery's sign bulb brightened by a shade. A cyclist reached a corner at the same moment a car slowed, and both smiled, and both waited, and both waved the other through twice. The woman's face softened. "She says the circle tells the town what to protect," she said. "Not a person. The way of being. Listening first." I drew a second circle beside the first, same size, same gap. I set the watch in the center. Tick, tick. The second hand paused again on the 12. Not delay, courtesy, as if the hour had bowed before stepping forward. The woman's phone buzzed once in her pocket. She did not take it out. She smiled instead. She says the town knows what soon means now. What does it mean? I asked. Soon is when both of you can set the minute hand, she said. Not at the same time. Together. I looked at the watch. The minute hand was already correct. Still, my thumb lifted toward the crown. Not yet, the woman said, then laughed, hearing herself echo the phrases from the notebook that had started this. She says you will know when the roof says yes. We listened. The school, old and well-mannered, waited with us. The lake did what lakes do when they agree to an evening. The second new thing arrived without sound. The jar fogged a little, only at the base, a breath that did not belong to me. Inside the fog, a curved stroke appeared and then faded. Another followed, not letters, practice. A hand remembering its line. My throat tightened without going closed. Grief tried to stand and then sat down again, as if reminded that there were seats for it here, and it did not need to crowd the aisle. Clara, I said, because the air had warmed the way it does when names are safe. The roof did not creak, but I felt something old in the stone ease under my knees. I thought of the circles on the steps, the small bridge between them, the way two thumb-wide gaps had chosen to close together. Tell me the part you kept, I said. I will tell you the part I kept. The school bell did not ring. A pencil sound came instead. The scratch of chalk that was not mine from somewhere below. A small circle drawn in the dark on old stone by a hand that had learned to share its shift. I pictured her on the steps at night, long ago, feeling lonely and telling the stair how to help until the stair believed her. I pictured myself last week, older and not as brave, kneeling and making the same small shape, finally. I kept the hour, I said. I kept it 5 minutes fast and tried to breathe for both of us. I forgot to stop forgetting. I am trying to stop now. A wind moved over the roof and did not chill. The jar cleared. The watch ticked once loudly and then softer, as if complimenting the breeze on its timing. The woman's eyes shone. She says she kept a place for you that did not ask you to be brave every minute, she said. She says you do not owe the night your posture anymore. I laughed. It came out like two whispered coughs and then settled into a smile I had not rehearsed. What is left, I asked, for tomorrow? The woman listened for the answer and tilted her head as if catching words through a wall. Choice, she said, with kindness, and a way to leave the door open after you walk through it. We sat together with that sentence before we stood. When we gathered the things, the roof did something I could feel more than prove. It lifted us by a fraction, like a polite hand under an elbow. Thank you for using the space as it likes to be used. That was the feeling. I accepted it. On the way down, the hallways smelled of chalk in a way that had nothing to do with dust. A living chalk. A fresh circle somewhere out of sight. At the steps, I paused. The twin gaps in yesterday's rings remained open by a seed width. Our small bridge line still warmed my palm. Tomorrow, I said to the stone, because the town likes to be addressed directly. We will let the hour choose its shape. Back at my building, Mrs. Lang's lamp was still on. She raised her cup in the window. I raised my hand back. We did not need to say anything through glass. Inside, I set the jar on the mantel. I placed the watch beside it. I stood a long time without adding or removing a single object. At 2:14, nothing called my name. I woke anyway. The watch's second hand paused at the top for the length of a slow inhale. In that pause, I heard the school bells half strike, as if it had flown here and rested in the case. Then a new sound joined, slight and steady. a breath to my left that matched mine only when I kept it gentle. "The other one," I said softly. "Do you want the cushion tonight or the floor?" The breath moved toward the cushion at the foot of the bed. I eased it closer to the wall so both of us would feel held. "Thank you," I said. The room brightened at the baseboards by the width of a thread. I wrote a line in the notebook without turning on the overhead light. "If you are not sure, choose the smaller circle and leave a gap big enough for a friend." I slept with my hand on the cover, not to keep vigil, only because sometimes contact is easier than convincing yourself you are allowed to rest. Morning arrived neatly. The firehouse clock chose its minutes without hesitation. The bakery opened on the first try. The ferry horn on the far river spoke one friendly syllable to the fog. On my table, beside the cushion, a faint ring of chalk dust had gathered in a circle the size of the watch. A matching ring had formed on the mantel around the jar. Soon, the chalk had said. Now almost had found a place. The woman texted at 8. 3 words: lake, noon, bridge. I texted back, "We will be there. Bring kindness," with a voice of its own. Liam sent a separate message 11 minutes later. He did not use words. He sent a picture of the new carnival print and the old one side by side. The gap was smaller again, not quite gone. I smiled and replied with a single line: "Hold them together. Let them breathe." The day arranged itself into a quiet invitation. As I reached for the watch, the minute hand twitched once toward the present, as if a second hand I could not see had nudged it. From the window, the lake answered with one soft ripple that returned to shore and waited. Some endings arrive like a door left on its latch, not closed, not open, simply waiting for the right hands. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and one word you would leave on a small stone for someone you miss. Noon at the lake came dressed in honest light. The water wore a slow shine that made the dock look newly sanded. Bird calls kept a tidy rhythm along the birches. Milford arranged itself without effort, as if it had practiced for this hour and liked how it felt. I carried the watch and the chalk. The jar rode in my bag, wrapped in the towel that had learned a season's worth of careful work. In my pocket lay the old note with its lake blue sentence: "Sleep guards you when you listen." Mrs. Lang met me at the field with her bicycle. Her scarf, soft green again, matched the lake where it turned shallow. She pressed my arm and looked pleased without making a ceremony of it. Liam arrived with the shortbread and the thin thermos. He had tucked the new carnival print and the old one into a stiff paper sleeve. The gap between our shoulders had narrowed again in the second print. Not gone, only honest about trying. The woman in the navy coat waited by the logs, braid over one shoulder, hands in her sleeves. When we reached her, she nodded toward the dock as if the lake had already spoken our names. "She says bridge," the woman said, "and that it matters we choose how." We stepped to the edge of the boards and did not cross. The wind breathed over our wrists and carried the faint powder scent of chalk even before I had touched the stub. "Quiet set," Mrs. Lang murmured. "One last time, and then the asking. Sound first." The minute hand on the firehouse clock clicked with a softness I could feel more than hear. A cyclist's tire whispered along crushed stone beyond the pines. Far across the water, a ferry called one round syllable, and then waited, patient. Touch next. The first plank felt sun-warmed and strong under my palm. I asked permission with the habit I had grown, and the wood answered with that small sigh that means willing. Sight. The dock lines held steady, seams even where yesterday's circles had encouraged them. Light gathered in quiet rings on the boards, as if the hour had saved enough for our work. Scent. Licorice steam when Liam opened the thermos. Cedar in the shade. A trace of Clara at 16 that had learned to visit without making a scene. Taste. Shortbread shared between us, and one set aside on the towel for the air. Ask, "What does bridge mean to you?" I said to the water, the sky, the gentle thickness beside my shoulder that had never asked for credit. A breeze crossed the dock and did not push. The jar in my bag cooled through the towel, that known temperature a hand remembers. The watch ticked a steady answer against my pulse. "Let us draw small first," I said. I knelt at the seam between shore and board and drew a circle no larger than a coin, thumb-wide gap near the top. Inside it I set the watch. The second hand rose to the 12 and paused. Not a freeze, a curtsy. Then it moved on, as if it had asked the hour to go ahead and would follow. The woman's face softened. "She says the town understands soon," she whispered. "It means together at the hinge." I drew a second circle beside the first and placed the jar inside, empty and proud of it. Light gathered at the base, a faint ring with no water to blame, only glass and patience. I stood and held my palm over both circles. "Clara," I said, because the air warmed by a breath, the sign I had learned to trust. "Tell me where you stand when we do this." The lullaby sounded from under the dock, not sung, only the notes placed like small stones across shallow water. I could walk them without looking. "She is at the step where your circles met," the woman said softly. Her hand on the chalk line. "Your hand on the watch. That is how she sees it." "Then we will match," I said. We stepped onto the dock together. Mrs. Lang stood to my left, with the easy attention of someone who can hold a room steady by being kind to it. Liam took my right, the prince tucked under his arm like a living comparison that had learned to breathe. At the first plank, I drew 2 more circles, small and even, their gaps facing in. I set the crown beside them so its points could witness. The paper held its shape, with the dignity of a thing that has decided to be useful again. "Ready," Mrs. Lang said, "choice with kindness." I looked at the watch. The minute hand stood 3 breaths before the exact noon tick. I looked at the jar. A clean fog stroked the inside like writing practicing without letters. "She is waiting for you at the step," the woman said. "She says you will know how to meet there without leaving where you are." Liam opened the paper sleeve and showed me both photos, old and new. Eyes closed in both, faces open in both, moon and crooked stars keeping us company. In the second, the backdrop had learned the color of our clothes between our shoulders. "Hold them together," he said, voice low. "Let them lean on each other for a minute." I set both prints on the towel with the corners touching, then reached into my bag and took out the bakery lid with the chalk sentence we had written long ago. "If we have to forget, use this to remember in pieces." My thumb fit the ring of paint without thinking. The town's clock drew 1 more breath before noon. "Clara," I said, steady and unafraid of names now. "Will you touch the minute hand while I touch the crown?" The watch answered with 1 crisp tick. The jar touched the light again, fog making a thin arc that settled where my palm would have rested if glass could hold hands. I set my fingertip on the crown, the small wheel that turns the hour into something a wrist can keep. I did not move it. I waited. The air to my left warmed as if a hand had arrived there and chosen to be gentle. The minute hand twitched, then steadied, then advanced by the width of a thought. At the top of the hill, the school bell formed half a note, then waited. The dock held still, the way old boards do when they approve of the decision and do not wish to steal the moment. "Now," Mrs. Lang said, so quiet I almost did not hear her. "Together and apart, in the way that does not require either to vanish." I turned the crown the smallest distance a careful person can turn a thing without forcing it. The minute hand sighed into place. At the same time, though I did not touch it, the second hand stood still and counted to the length of 1 slow inhale, as if someone else had set that part and wanted to show her work. The bell on the hill struck 1 clear note, not a count, a welcome. The lake breathed and sent a ring outward, that held its shape for 3 long heartbeats before dissolving into smaller ripples. 2 gulls crossed paths without fuss and continued. I lifted my finger. The watch kept time. My chest matched it without the old need to run ahead. "That was the bridge," the woman said, eyes bright. "Not a plank or a rope. A rule taught to the hour." "Does it hold?" I asked, "after we walk away?" "It holds if you choose it again," Mrs. Lang said. "That is what kindness does. It invites, it does not trap." We stayed a while without trying to improve the day. Liam poured tea, and we shared it in small sips. He placed 1 biscuit at the edge of the plank for the wind, and another for whatever kept the planks in their good mood. "Tell me your piece," I said into the simple air that had carried us a season. "The part you kept for me." The water brought back a sound from the steps, chalk across stone. 1 circle, then another, then the small bridge line. A hand I could not see practicing the gap until it felt right to close it. "She says she kept a place where you could be ordinary," the woman whispered. "A room that does not require bravery to enter." I laughed, light at the edges. It felt like washing a cup and putting it away exactly where it belongs. "Thank you," I said, both out loud and with the quiet that follows a true word. We gathered the towel and the prints and the crown. I set the watch in my pocket where it could feel the turn of walking. The jar came last, empty and content. At the pines, the boy with the bike waited and lifted his cap in a solemn hello. "Did you fix the lake?" he asked. "We taught it a song it already knew," I said. He considered this and nodded as if it matched something his day had been thinking. We crossed the field. The town chose to keep its normal shape and still be generous with its attention, a trick it had learned in the past weeks. At the corner, Liam stopped and held out the 2 prints again. "May I keep the new one at the shop?" he asked. "On a shelf no one looks at unless they mean to." "Yes," I said. "Let it breathe there." "And the old one?" he asked. I looked at the moon and the crooked stars and our closed eyes. "Bring it to the school," I said. "Leave it in the office where the lost and found used to be. It will like hearing the keys rattle." He grinned because certain instructions sound like home. Mrs. Lang walked me to my building door and touched the frame with 2 fingers in that quiet ritual that had become our handshake. "Bless the hinge," she said. "Bless the hinge," I answered. In my living room, the mantle waited without asking me to perform for it. I set the jar back in its place. I placed the crown to its left, the carnival photo to its right. Between them, the watch rested on the folded towel, face up and content with the hour it had. I watered the fern that had survived in spite of my old habits. I set a glass on the sill and spoke the time for the room, 2:14, and I smiled at saying that number without the old tug. The stairwell light hummed its 2 notes. I could have matched it. I did not need to. In the notebook labeled "Rules for Sharing the Night," I wrote the last rule and left space beneath it. If a day offers a bridge, cross at walking speed and wave to the water. Evenings slid into the windows and found places it liked. I made tea that was too strong and drank it anyway. I left the door locked, and then unlocked, and then locked again so the latch would feel included. Kindness has a taste, and my rooms had learned it. At 2:14, my eyes opened on their own. The watch kept time without hurry. A second breath sounded near the cushion at the foot of the bed. It matched mine only when I kept mine gentle. "The other one," I said softly, smiling toward the quilt. "I am going to sleep in the smaller circle tonight. Will you take the hall for a while, so the house can practice?" A draft touched the bottom of the door, friendly and light. The stairwell hummed, pleased to be needed properly. I slept. No vigil, no extra lists. Morning arrived balanced on the windowsill. The firehouse clock found its number without thinking. The bakery door chimed once and stopped. Somewhere beyond the pines, the fairy called that same round syllable and let it rest in the air. I made coffee and looked at the mantel. Something had shifted by a hair and a half. The carnival photo leaned a degree toward the jar, as if listening. The crown faced the room rather than the window. The watch sat exactly where I had placed it, and still, I felt new space around it, like a second chair pulled a little closer. On the sill, 2 glasses stood side by side. In the window's reflection, both lifted a fraction, a polite toast for anyone who needed to feel included before breakfast. I carried the chalk to the school steps and found our twin circles still there, the small bridge line warm under my palm even in morning shade. Someone had swept the landing. Leaves had gathered themselves politely along the edges. Under the office window, a small basket sat where lost scarves used to wait for their people. Inside lay the old carnival photograph, face down, a pencil circle on the back almost closed, with a gap the width of a seed. Next to it, a folded card in a careful hand. If this is yours, thank you for listening. If it is not, thank you for leaving it for a little longer. I smiled and left the photo where it belonged. Some objects do their best work when they are not carried home. On the walk back, the town felt satisfied in the way kitchens feel after dishes have dried in the rack and been put away. Not perfect, just right. Mrs. Lang waved from her window with her reading glasses on top of her head. Liam crossed the street with a stack of books in his arms and did not drop a single one. The woman in the navy coat sat on the bench by the birches, with her hands tucked in her sleeves, face turned toward the water, listening. At my door, I paused and pressed 2 fingers to the hinge the way we had learned, then stepped inside a room that had learned the same. I knew I could still hear her when the day needed it. I knew I did not have to ask every hour to prove itself. I knew the bridge was not a span of wood or stone, but a habit any decent town could share. I wound the watch by one careful turn, then stopped, then spoke to the hour. Hold what you can, and let the rest travel well. The stairwell hummed in agreement. The floor stayed quiet. The glass on the sill lifted its reflection a fraction in that small toast I had come to love. I set the chalk on the notebook and left the last line open, a place where any listener might write their own rule when they were ready. That evening, the bell on the hill struck 12 in the proper way, and nothing insisted on a 13th. Still, as sleep folded itself over the house, a single soft chime sounded from somewhere in town, clear then gone, the kind of sound you do not chase because you know it will find you again when you have made room for it. Some endings are latches, some are bridges. This one is a little of both, and the door is kind to whoever comes next. On a quiet morning a week later, the watch paused at the top for one patient breath, and in that breath I heard it. Not loud, not far. A girl adjusting her chalk circle and telling the stone with a smile in her voice, "Leave the gap. Someone might need it."